This episode of How to Wrestling was requested by Alex Thompson, one of our lovely backers over at patreon.com/How to Wrestling. And hey, today's episode is sponsored by a long-time listener and good pal of the podcast, Henry Shaw, who in the midst of a pandemic has only been dreadfully productive and went and made a brand new webcomic. If you, like myself, are a fan of the likes of Final Fantasy, Dragon Ball Z, or good old-fashioned Dungeons & Dragons, then his new webcomic, The Cleanser, is going to be right up your alley. If you're a fan of any of those particular pieces of media, you're no doubt very well aware of summoners. You know, summoners, always bringing things in from other realms like fearsome dragons, powerful ancient deities. Well, the question Henry asks is, where do such beings go when they're not being summoned? Are summoners taking them away from their families and their normal day-to-day lives? Well, Rollin is one such summon, struggling with these dilemmas. Known to many as the Grand Summon, the Cleanser, Rollin answers to countless summoners across numerous worlds, an eternal bondage that he seeks to desperately break himself away from. You can check out issue 1 of The Cleanser by Henry Shaw, available now on Webtoon. Head over to Webtoon, search The Cleanser to check out the first issue there. I'd highly recommend it if you're after a bit of a fantasy fix. Big shout out to Henry for sponsoring the episode. And don't forget, if you have got a webcomic, a project, a podcast, a blog, a website, a series, whatever it is, if you'd like to get our fans' eyes and ears on it, head over to patreon.com/How to Wrestling for any and all information about sponsoring an episode or any and all inquiries, howtowrestling@gmail.com. But now they're all settled in, it's time to get high as a kite and get ready for the truly one-of-a-kind Rob Van Dam. Greetings, friends, and welcome to another episode of How to Wrestling, the world's first podcast detailing how to wrestling, how to get into wrestling, how to understand wrestling, and goodness knows, maybe even how to enjoy wrestling. And today we're setting our sights high and we're talking about the truly one-of-a-kind Rob Van Dam, Mr. Monday Night, the whole feckin' show as he's known. Hello once again, it's me, your old pal Cowboy Kevin, joined as I am in this look back on some of the most important people, things, and aspects of the world of wrestling by my better half, the also one-of-a-kind, Jo Graham.
Hello.
How are you doing today, Jo?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm really excited to talk a bit about Rob Van Dam.
This is an intriguing one. This is someone who I think has appeared a few times maybe in podcasts past, but it was also someone who I was convinced you were going to love.
Yeah.
But maybe it's turned out that you didn't love them for the reason that I might have thought that you loved them in the first place.
Oh.
Tell me, what is it you know about Rob Van Dam? How would you describe RVD as he's known for the folks at home?
Rob Van Dam, he is a stoner.
Okay, let's get that out of the way.
Get that right out of the way. That's what I know about him. He loves the weed. He wears very colourful singlets with yin-yangs on them. He does flip-de-doos.
Oh, yeah.
He was in ECW. That's pretty much the extent of my knowledge. I remember we watched a match with him in, I really enjoyed I think it was our first episode actually, about John Cena.
Oh, yeah.
At One Night Stand.
Yeah, God, you're right. That was the first match where I was like, okay, I think that, there's enough in the world of wrestling to whet your appetite that I had not considered, maybe.
Yeah, and I loved that match so much. I loved both John and Rob Van Dam in it. And yeah, that's pretty much my only experience with Rob Van Dam, other than he did show up at this year's WrestleMania to give the great Khali some extra large rolling papers. Yeah, so again, I think it's probably good that you mentioned that the love of marijuana for Rob Van Dam kind of quite early on. To say Rob is an enthusiast in the standard way is probably a bit of an understatement, because we've watched some clips of him on interviews talking about the wonder material known as hemp, including at one point going on a lengthy diatribe about a car made of hemp. Oh yeah, apparently one of the earliest cars was designed to run on hemp, use hemp as a fuel.
But he said it was made of hemp as well.
Did he actually say that?
He did. He said the car was made of hemp.
How would that work?
And then the industrial complex shut down, and it was Henry Ford as well.
His special fabric car.
So I looked up about this, and there's loads of stuff out there on hemp advocacy websites about it. It's mentioned quite a lot. But actually trying to get to the meat of the matter and whether or not there was a car made of hemp, there was a car that was made out of like bioplastic,
right?
Which is made out of like corn and soybeans and such.
Okay, so hypothetically, it could be made of hemp. And I know that the reason that he was saying that it's so important that it was made of hemp is because hemp is very easy to grow.
Yeah.
And it can grow pretty much in most areas, unlike things like corn. So I guess maybe that's why it would be extra sustainable.
And I mean, you mentioned as well that it ran like there is stuff to like, you know, you can run cars on hemp oil and stuff like that as well. I think this is worth pointing out because you did mention at the start, you know, oh, he's known as a stoner or whatever. And I feel it's something that will probably pop up here and there. But I think it's quite easy, or it's very lazy, I guess, just to throw it off as being like, he likes to get high all the time.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's obviously an aspect to it, but Rob is very passionate about advocacy and all that.
That one clip we watched together, I was amazed at how educated he was. Like, he was talking about like lobbyists and like the tobacco industry and the alcohol industry and how they're all like, one of the reasons why it's been so long to get marijuana legalized is because of certain lobbyists in certain industries like saying that they don't want to lose out their share of financial control by legalizing things like marijuana. And that was very interesting to me. I didn't know any of that stuff. Like, he's obviously has, like, it's not just a case of he likes to get high, although I think that is a big part of it. But he's put the work in to, like, understand why he's such an advocate for it, which is good because you don't want to just go around and be like, hey, kids, so cool to get high, without, like, understanding the wider social issue.
Yeah, he's got a kind of a wider point, I guess. And I think in 2021, I think this is the least controversial thing in the world for someone to be out there being an advocate for marijuana, seeing as, you know, particularly in America.
In America.
But like for Rob Van Dam, I think it's funny. I think he's probably been quite vindicated in a lot of his advocacy and stuff like that. And particularly as well, how many times have we started to talk on an episode of this podcast about someone who's done a lot of illegal drugs, and it's usually not been worked out in their favor, or it's usually kind of been something that has been a massive blight over their career and has, you know, brought all sorts of, you know, ill will. I mean, even alcohol and, you know, painkillers, steroids. It feels like we're talking about every illicit drug under the planet sometimes in this show.
Yeah.
But I think Rob has probably by time been vindicated alone.
Yes.
But I think one of the most interesting things about Rob is that if you listen to him on a shoot interview talk about it long enough, he will enter into the phantom zone of pure bullshit.
As soon as you were saying that, my mind immediately went to the bit that I remember where he started talking about how inhaling smoke is good for your lungs because you don't, like, most people don't get to inhale that deeply, and like, so it's actually really good for your lung capacity.
Yeah, because I mean, and let me get me wrong, like, no one's actually done the research on it, but potentially if you were to be inhaling that much, who's not to say that, you know, it could be of a, like, you know, like a benefit. And it's like, I get you, Rob.
I remember that argument being passed around by stoner boys at my school, being like, if you smoke weed, you will live on average like 10 years longer, and everyone else be like, come on now.
All right, now I was a secondary / high school biology teacher and college lecturer, so I've had this chat
I bet,
with some of the most enthusiastic 15-year-old marijuana enthusiasts.
But sir.
And the one I'd always give him is, well, did you know that you don't have a filter on that, so it's like smoking 20 cigarettes now, so it is. And all the hands would go down then, wouldn't they? But then Rob comes back in, actual quote from Rob Van Dam, but the THC can, like, you know, like, overwhelm the lungs and, like, coat it and, like,
it's the good smoke.
Help it. Yeah. Rob, you had me on hemp car. You don't need to go any further with this. But yeah, I think another kind of thing about Rob is that I think he probably tapped into some of that kind of, as part of ECW, he's part of that kind of counterculture and whatnot. I think even I have erroneously said that he was on the cover of High Times back in the day. He was just an article featured within High Times.
I feel like even I have seen a cover for him.
There's a mock-up, yeah.
Right, that must be where it's come from then. Because, yeah, I have this strong mental image of him on the cover of High Times magazine. It's like, no, apparently that never happened.
It is something like, throughout my childhood and my watching of wrestling, where we would always giggle and titter, I'd be like, I bet he's high, or he looks high here, and he's high there, and all that. He has confirmed in the last couple of years that he was high almost every single time he was wrestling.
Wow.
Like, almost without exception.
God.
Which I'm quite impressed that he managed to pull that off, seeing as he's someone who wrestled for the WWE for many, many years. And for, companies that had drug testing, and apparently you would get fined thousands of dollars for doing that.
Yeah, God. How do you get away with doing that for that long, that consistently? I've got a question, though, with regards to wrestling.
Yeah.
Like, now I would say that, you shouldn't drive under the influence of drugs or alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, like, probably the similar rules apply to, like, operating heavy machinery or, like, operating a heavy person.
I mean, a person is a heavy machine of sorts.
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Like, is that really safe to wrestle while under the influence of drugs?
I don't know if it's the thing that Rob told his opponents is the thing,
Yeah. But, like, so you only think it's a problem if they knew about it?
No, I mean, I think, like, generally speaking, like we said in the Salmon episode, if he was drunk, it's probably not a good idea.
Yeah.
But he claimed his aim was better when he was hitting people with a Singapore cane.
Yeah.
I would think in an ideal world, no one should be wrestling and having anyone's kind of body or responsibility in their hands under the influence of anything, like. But I mean, I would imagine most wrestlers would be of that opinion as well.
Yeah.
Also, I'm very well aware that Rob Van Dam may have been saying that to sound cool. Which
He just wants to impress his friends.
yeah, exactly. And now that the weed culture has become more the norm in America, he has to say more shocking things maybe to get people to kind of think he's still wicked bad and all that. I mean, are you aware of like much use of like marijuana and cannabis in wrestling? Like, are there people who you would is this something you suspect is widespread in wrestling, or has historically been in wrestling?
I mean, I hate to bring up his foul name in this household, but Matt Riddle, I know, is a big stoner. He loves the weed.
Yeah.
Other than that, it's something that I always imagined, like, because I know a lot of wrestlers liked to party, and I always thought of cannabis being kind of like a party drug. Like, it's one of those ones that you might, if you drink a bit, you might want a smoke as well. Like, you might take a toke of a spliff. And
Talk to Frank, Joe. Come on now. This crazy drug talk that I'm hearing from you now.
And so I always assumed that like wrestlers did smoke weed occasionally, but I didn't ever think of it as like the type of drug that they would do, like steroids, where they kind of use it to do their job.
Right, or like kind of painkillers.
Yeah, painkillers,
or things like that, where it's kind of, I need this. Or, in our Jake episode, where there were wrestlers who were doing coke because they needed to wake up, and they, they would do stuff because they needed to calm down at night and stuff. Yeah, I mean, there were people in wrestling, and it goes back all the way through, like, the Golden Age and the Hogan era and all that, who were known as the medicine men in wrestling.
Medicine men.
Yeah, people like the Iron Sheik, Hacksaw Jim Duggan.
So suppliers, basically, to the locker room.
Suppliers and imbibers,
right,
one and the same. To quote Honky Tonk Man once in a shoot interview, looking very thoughtfully, Hulk Hogan smoked a lot of pot.
I am not surprised.
Ravishing Rick Rude. I mean,
really?
it's pretty much a who's who in wrestling.
Now, I remember hearing once that Vince McMahon occasionally partook.
Now, I've not heard stories to that nature. The only thing I would guarantee you, though, is that Vince has definitely tried it with other people because, he's definitely, like, done drugs with the boys back in the 80s. He did steroids to make Macho Man think he was cool and all that jazz. So that wouldn't surprise me at all. But I guess going into, like, the Attitude Era in the 90s, like, as a kid, I remember, like, watching wrestlers and they'd be like, your ass is grass and I'm gonna smoke it. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Give me that Kevin Smith movie. I want to give a watch of that. And there was, like, it's something that has kind of persisted in one way or shape or form into modern times. There were wrestlers who were kind of outwardly known as being big pot smokers.
Right.
In WWE, Randy Orton and R-Truth among the known medicine men to this day.
Interesting. R-Truth surprises me. Randy Orton doesn't at all.
Why is that? Is it because of
know.
his shifty new goatee that he's got?
No, it's because I know he's a bit like, and I'm going to sound really rude saying this, and I don't want to sound rude, but like, he's lazy. So I just imagine that's like kind of like a appealing drug to him because it like would help you relax and stuff. Like, he seems like a type of guy who likes to just chill out. I
mean, in Mick Foley's, I think it was his second book, he wrote a big thing about like kind of the use of drugs and alcohol by people in wrestling to kind of cope. And he kind of wrote quite eloquently that, like, of all the things and all the evils in the world that a wrestler could have on the road, if he smokes a little pot or smokes a bit of weed in his hotel room, that's surely better than getting a load of, GHB or a load of OxyContin and then going drinking a load of Jack Daniels and gargling the shots and going out and getting blackout drunk in the morning, then waking up and doing coke so you can hit the gym.
Yeah, exactly.
It kind of feels like, yeah, it probably should be a necessary thing in it should be available in wrestling. Pain management. I mean, Mauro Ranallo, remember we talked about him in our commentary episode. His life was practically saved by marijuana.
Yeah, of
you
course,
know?
God.
Helping with his depression, all that, and there's no shortage of mental health problems in wrestling. But yet, in spite of all those names that I've listed, I think only one person has been given the moniker as being like wrestling's stoner, and that seems to be Rob Van Dam, and to a lesser extent now Matt Riddle, who painfully after doing this research seems like Vince McMahon just wants to make into a little bit of a Rob Van Dam knockoff. So we watched a couple little bits for Rob. We checked out some of his shoot interviews that he has done. We also watched a movie that came out 2 years ago called Headstrong, which followed Rob Van Dam along as he was doing a stand-up comedy tour. I think we'll hit on that a little bit later. And we also watched the WWE Icons documentary that they released about him. So we're going to be going through that, but we'll probably take some pit stops along the way for matches and reckonings with the truth, etc.
Okay.
So Rob Van Dam had many monikers. I don't know if you picked up any of his monikers that he had. He's called Mr. This, Mr. That.
The whole fucking show.
Hey! Very good. Mr. Monday Night.
Oh, okay.
And also Mr. Pay-Per-View.
Oh, I didn't know either of those. Why is he... Okay, Mr. Pay-Per-View is self-explanatory.
Well, what's Mr. Pay-Per-View mean to you?
I'm guessing it means he stole the show.
Yes.
Mr. Monday Night, though... I don't, because the only thing I think of with Monday Night is Raw.
Yes, well, that is actually it. Yeah.
So what? He was like a big Raw guy.
Well, we'll get into it. He did have some kind of affiliations with the Monday Night show at one point.
Okay.
But also when he was in TNA, he was called Mr. Thursday Night, and he was Mr. Tuesday Night when he was in ECW and Sci-Fi. It's basically Mr. Whatever Night of the Week wrestling's on. Like,
I guess it's because he's the whole fucking show.
Hey, Mr. Streaming Platform, like Mr. Proprietary Streaming Service, Mr. Peacock could be his new name if he makes a return. He emphasizes early on in this documentary that he did things his way. He didn't fit in. He was kind of someone who marched to the beat of his own drum. Now, was that something which you had figured about Rob, that he would be that kind of square peg in a round hole?
I mean, anyone who I think talks publicly about their penchant for marijuana in a country where it's not legal is going to be a little bit like that.
Yeah, but like in wrestling as well, do you not think in wrestling would be open arms for someone like Rob Van Dam?
In what way?
I don't know, that he was kind of counterculture and he was super popular with the fans.
Yeah.
And yet he kind of pitches his story as being like he took the difficult path. He took the path of not of least resistance.
I mean, I don't really get that, really. I don't know where that's coming from, because, like, as far as I know, everyone loves Rob Van Dam, and he was very popular and very over, and, like... I mean, I know that there's some wrestlers who weren't as fond of him, but, like... I mean, is it true that he took the road less... In what way? I know his wrestling style was quite unique.
I mean, like, Rob, I guess, is the fact that he was just... I mean, I empathize with him a lot, because he was someone that, like, within a corporate structure or whatever, he didn't like being told what to do. Like, he liked creative freedom. He kind of had a reputation for someone who would like turn down a lot of stuff, like a lot of storylines that were pitched to him and things like that. But I think honestly what you said is probably the most true aspect of it, is that there were a number of wrestlers who he didn't get along with.
Yeah.
And when you don't get along with high profile wrestlers, you get labeled as being someone who takes the difficult path and the road less traveled, brother, and all that, you know. One of the coolest hometown names of all time, Rob Van Dam, hails from Battle Creek, Michigan. Oh,
that's very cool.
I was convinced as a child that wasn't real.
Yeah, no, I'm not convinced that's real now as an adult.
Battle Creek,
where the Transformers come from.
I was going to say it's where like kind of it looks like a Terry Pratchett novel will be set in Battle Creek or something like that.
No,
well, a creek? No, I guess it'd be more canals that you'd
not
have.
Battle. There's not many battles in Terry Pratchett.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh, well there. You just taught me out of reading Terry Pratchett.
Oh, really? That's all you care about, battles.
I love battles, babe. It's what I'm all about. He mentioned several times in the interviews and stuff that we watched that he was kind of, as a young boy, had been kind of earmarked as being a very smart little boy.
Yeah, he was told by teachers that he was offered basically a chance to skip a grade when he was in 5th grade. Snip, snip. I don't know what grade he was in.
I think it was like he was in second grade, and they were saying, "Oh, you could skip a whole grade and
Right.
go up and all that." But then he says that by the time he was in fourth grade and he didn't skip a grade, his teachers were like, "What the fuck happened to this kid? He's a total fucking goof and all that." Not the first person to be destroyed as a child by the weighty expectations of being listed as being gifted and talented and all that.
Sure. I wonder why he didn't skip a grade though if he was offered it.
I mean, there's loads of reasons why you wouldn't want to skip a grade, I guess. I mean, like, being a young kid in a much older class.
Yeah.
You know, I was the youngest kid in my class the entire time, like, every year I was in school, because I was kind of between 2 years, so they put me in, they thought, oh, go in early is better, and fucking terrible. Because you're just being the youngest is, like, never you wanted to be that in a class.
Right.
Particularly in a class full of boys as well, I guess. But yeah, Rob Van Dam, he was not particularly athletic in school. He wasn't like someone who did a lot of sports or things of that nature.
He specifically mentioned that he was not good at PE, which I think is really interesting because PE, I think, in a lot of people's experience, it's a very particular type of sports and it's often competitive.
Yeah.
And he doesn't come across as a competitive person whatsoever. And I think a lot of people could relate to that. The idea of, you know, like lots of us, I think, have embraced exercise in adulthood because we found out that it doesn't need to be aggressive and competitive.
Or sport necessarily.
Or sport, yeah. It can just be something that you do to like feel good about yourself.
Yeah, I think like I totally was shocked though to find that out about Rob just because he's so gifted athletically.
Yeah.
I guess it shows you like you carry that kind of mindset from when you're a kid, because I probably only started exercising actually at all for the first time in my life when I was probably like 26 or 27.
Yeah.
You know, other than like random moments of like, you know, self-loathing where I'm going to start like running like for 1 week and then never do any exercise for another 4 years. But like, yeah, I think Rob, that's almost like a really inspiring thing, you know, where it's like, yeah, it doesn't have to be a big competition or a big sport. And I don't know about you, but no shortage of weird fucking stories from PE class when I was a kid and the weird competitive stuff that kids were put through.
I think it says a lot about the state of PE is that if someone like Rob Van Dam, who's so naturally gifted athletically, couldn't even succeed, then like what hope do most of us others have? Like, it's just not set up really for children to enjoy exercise.
I became a teacher in like 2014 or 15 or thereabouts. And naively in my mind, I thought as I was learning, like, wow, teaching has changed so much. I bet PE is way different now.
No.
Guess what? It's like it was when you were a kid, but worse. Imagine that. Like, the other thing about Rob, which was hugely shocking to me, and just kind of just fit, was that he thought wrestling was lame as shit when he first was a kid.
Oh, well, because they all had silly names. And to be fair, the ones he mentioned were the ones that I laugh at as well, like Brutus Beefcake.
Butch Reed.
What was the other one? It was like...
Big John Stud.
That's it, I was going to say like Big Cock Man. It was like, Big John Stud is basically the same.
Where were you when Andre the Giant took on Big Cock Man at WrestleMania 1? But yeah, I mean, that was something similar that I had when I was a kid.
Yeah.
You know, I remember some of the earliest wrestling I watched, and I was like, this man's called Badass Billy Gunn. This is the fucking stupidest thing I've ever seen. And I watched like 2 matches with my brother and be like, and this is what you like, is it? Yeah. With a riveting action, and oh my god, look at that guy with the mask. Whoa! So yeah, Rob Van Dam, basically too cool for school and also too cool for wrestling in the 80s. But the one thing that changed his mind was going to actually see it live.
Right, yeah.
I think seeing live wrestling is that much of it. I mean, we've been in the pandemic forever now, it feels like. But live wrestling, does it have that kind of special X factor?
Oh, when it's done well, it definitely does. Yeah, there is something special, I think, about seeing people wrestle in the flesh. Like when you actually feel the floor move from the big slams they do, and you can like, you feel the energy of the audience all around you. There is this atmosphere and excitement that just you can only get from being at a live wrestling show.
I think everyone needs to sit front row at a wrestling show at least once. Like, you know, even if you don't like live wrestling, you need to be up close, even on a really small show, just so you can experience that, I think. The greatest introduction into wrestling ever, and I had no idea about this. Young Rob's very first appearance in WWF in the 80s.
It's amazing they've actually got footage of this.
Yeah.
Of him in the crowd, and Ted DiBiase's there, and he's doing his whole thing that we talked about in the Dusty episode where he's like saying everybody has his price. He's basically like, he's challenging people in the audience to like kiss his feet for a certain amount of money.
Yeah, I don't know. Anytime we watch anything now and a foot pops up, Joe's like, "Oh, someone likes feet. Who's making this?"
Now it's gotten so much, like, I say it so many times now that now you've started saying it.
Yeah, pretty much. Like, as soon as this was like, "Oh, Ted DiBiase's got a foot thing." Clearly,
interesting, because I thought, oh, Rob Van Dam's got a foot thing.
So the idea is meant to be to get heel heat for the $1 Million Man. He's going to say, like, everyone's got a price, you know, everyone, you know, even these kids in this crowd, I'll pay them $100 and they'll come and kiss my feet. And like Rob explains, like, I used to watch the TV show, how this worked. You go in, you say, no, I won't do it. And then he ups the money. And then you go, no. And then he ups the money again. And then you eventually break and you have to, you know, do the nasty thing and you get the money. And Rob Van Dam, he wasn't much of a negotiator, Joe.
No, Ted DiBiase's like, for $100, you gotta kiss my stinky feet. And he really emphasizes that his feet smell like shit.
He
like
just wrestles.
Banging. They really do not smell nice. And Rob Van Dam, he comes in with a big grin on his face and he's immediately on all fours, kissing his feet. Yes, sir, I'll kiss your feet, sir.
Easiest $100 payday ever. I mean,
no, it's fine, keep the money, I don't care.
I mean, not many people in wrestling get to go home with $100 in their back pocket on their first time they kiss a foot.
I know. Also, that's quite a cool story to say that you kissed Ted DiBiase's feet. Even if you don't like feet, that's cool.
I think it's like, just, it says a lot that I never knew about this until like very, very recently, that I don't think WWF wanted you to know that a young Rob Van Dam was kissing feet and not even negotiating, like, you know? I mean, hey, you shouldn't bring your lawyer or anything like that. Vince says that you should try and negotiate your own contracts. It's good experience. You end up like Rob Van Dam with a smelly foot and $100 to your name. Now, I knew that Rob Van Dam was involved in, you know, kickboxing and stuff like that, mainly because, I mean, the man has educated feet, I think we could say, Joe.
Yeah.
But I always assumed it was a thing that he was this big wheel or this big deal in the world of like kickboxing or striking or whatever, and then like he decided to get into wrestling. I didn't realize how he got into kickboxing is because him and his friends really wanted to become wrestlers, and the only place in Battle Creek that had a ring was a kickboxing dojo.
Yeah, so apparently they literally saw, you know, they were wandering around the area and they saw this guy's house with a big wrestling ring in the backyard. And so they knocked on his door and were like, excuse me, sir, can we use your wrestling ring? And he was like, what, wrestling? What? And then he was like, I tell you what, if you come to my kickboxing class, afterwards I will let you use the ring.
Now, I'd heard variations on this before, that he saw them doing, like, they would do the kickboxing classes and then afterwards they would, you know, just train themselves, basically. So they weren't even getting training. They were just getting a space to try shit. I think that's where a lot of Rob's early stuff came from, was the fact that, well, I'm not being taught wrestling, but we learned these cool kicks and maybe we could work them and all that.
That's it. And kickboxing actually is quite a lot of the similar skills from what I know of kickboxing. Like, you still learn to fall properly and stuff like
obviously
that.
if you're sparring and stuff, you're going to be able to learn how to kick and make a bit of contact but not kick someone's head off, which maybe Rob didn't pick up that lesson entirely in his career. More on that later on. But I had always heard how this works, and this happened with other people who trained in like boxing or kickboxing, was that they would get these wrestler kids to come in and do some training, and then they would put on a show, and we get the wrestling kids to come out and kind of work it a little bit, wink wink. But we saw footage of Rob as a youngster doing kickboxing, and to say that it was a spectacle, it is not. Like,
it's so boring.
Like, and they were like, Rob went in there and he started killing people, and like they're all padded up, and like literally just a few bops here and there.
Yeah, they're done.
People are passed out.
He said he found it so easy. He was like this. Well, I never thought it would be this easy. He was like absolutely laughing at how ridiculous he found it. I
mean, it was really funny that they actually found Rob's sensei. Did you catch what his name was?
No.
The White Dragon.
Oh, wow.
He's 103 in kickboxing, so not so bad. Eric Bischoff, you get in the ring with this karate man, see how you fare. And the nicest thing the White Dragon had to say about Rob Van Dam, the documentary, was his love of wrestling kind of bummed me out. Oh. He finds out then very shortly thereafter he's working in a grocery store, I always love when these stories in wrestling happen. Like, you see a big, muscly, 300-pound guy walking around, and you're like, hey, you, I want to become a wrestler. And he finds out that only 40 minutes away, who's there but the original Sheik, who's training in Michigan. And the original Sheik was one of the most terrifying heels in the history of wrestling. This was a man who people viewed as being like an actual monster, like a supernatural being in some respects, who would come over. He would do things like throw fire. He would stab people with forks, spikes.
Ooh.
Proper, like, you know, like we talked about a little bit of Abdullah the Butcher in McFoley's episode, like proper, like, blood. That was how he got over. Never spoke English. He'd bite people, sharpened his teeth, all this horrible fucking nasty stuff. And Rob went to train with him and his nephew, who is Sabu. So, very young age, those two boys were hooked up together.
Wow, so how old would he have been at this point?
Like teenager, like 17, 18, probably, thereabouts.
Nice.
Now, he claims that the Sheik never broke kayfabe the entire time that they trained with him.
I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, knowing what we know, like, doing this podcast is basically like every wrestler you love didn't know that wrestling was fixed until their first match, at least.
There was only one time where the Sheik would break kayfabe, and that's apparently when his wife would show up. Oh, not his wife, sorry, his grandkids would show up. And then he'd be like, and he'd be like, hey, you want to see some magic? And he'd do, like, fireballs for them or whatnot, as opposed to, like, not telling them that it's predetermined.
Wow.
Not telling them that they have to keep themselves safe.
Oh, dear.
But Rob says that it was a good way to learn, because by being taught like it was a shoot and all that, they themselves and the students had to kind of like just figure out all right, let's figure out how to do it safely. He wants me and you to like throw each other around for 5 minutes. Let's like tuck our chin, make sure we land flat on our back and all that.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a fucking high risk, high reward situation though.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Can you imagine someone trying to teach you in full kayfabe these days?
How would that? You just couldn't.
No, but even back then, it seems like wild that that actually was how he came into it. He gets the name Rob Van Dam because someone he's training with tells him he bears an uncanny resemblance to the muscles from Brussels, Jean-Claude Van Damme.
He looks exactly like him.
Yeah, definitely.
Like they're not kidding. He really got given that name for good reason.
Have you seen much Jean-Claude Van Damme?
Not really. I think I've seen him in like one or two things.
Have we not watched Time Cop together, Joe?
I've watched Time Cop before I met you.
Oh, every boyfriend wants to be the first person to introduce someone to Time Cop.
Yeah, so you can explain it.
They're going back in time now, as much as it is like.
He's a cop.
So he's referred to in kayfabe in these early shows that he's doing as being Jean-Claude Van Damme's cousin.
Very good lie, because he looks enough like Jean-Claude Van Damme where he could actually be his brother, but cousin is enough of a gap, I think, to make it sound really realistic.
Yeah, the way that Ric Flair could have been Dusty Rhodes' cousin.
Yeah.
You know, be rambling Ricky Rhodes, you know. I do remember, like, very, very early days, you know, my brother's friends coming around with some ECW videos, and the chatter amongst the boys was that he was Jean-Claude Van Damme's cousin, but they kept it secret because they didn't want you to know. Like, oh, right, that's why he bears a striking resemblance and has 2 of the 3 names. Yeah, very, very
nice.
good. Yeah,
good secret. Don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Kayfabe's being exposed here. He also says that he tried to do the fake Belgian accent.
Yeah, someone told him he had to do the accent to sound like him.
Because, you know, we always want to hear Jean-Claude Van Damme talk. That's the most important thing.
That's
right?
the really good thing, yeah.
He explains in 1991, he's doing some indies and he goes on a tour to Jamaica for the first time. And I was quite shocked that WWE would talk about this, but I think it really shows you how much... Like, WWE is a good bellwether, not for how America thinks, but for how corporate America thinks people think.
Definitely.
And they reckon that they can talk about marijuana and weed and stuff like that now, and that's totally fine. And that there's, you know, and they have Rob Van Dam talking on a WWE documentary about the first time he smoked weed, which I was quite surprised by.
God, it was apparently his birthday, his like 18th birthday, which is very convenient. I don't know if he was just saying that so no one would get into trouble, or if it was like actually his 18th birthday.
We'd heard this story as well twice. Once on a shoot interview, once on this doc. And the doc version was a lot cleaner than the shoot interview, yeah.
So he apparently was with all these wrestlers who he all looked up to and admired, and they were like, hey, we've got this cool weed here. And they like peer pressured him into smoking weed, and they were like, what, you a pussy? It's not going to kill you. Fucking smoke the weed.
And then he did.
And then he did.
And he got stoned.
And he had a bad time and
Yeah.
stared at a wall, apparently, and was
Stared at a
really
wall.
self-conscious and anxious.
He was really worried. I mean, he says it hit him straight away like that. Oh, wow, there's all these like really high caliber athletes who smoke weed. But I thought that, because I'd been taught as a kid that weed will kill you and it's a gateway drug. And
Yeah.
that, I'll become a burnout and all this terrible stuff will happen to me. Now, the actual story that he told in the shoot interview was a lot less kind of like, hey, why don't you try this, Rob? You might like it. It's literally like a ring of men in a smoke-filled cabin in Jamaica going, fucking hit it, you fucking pussy! Fucking hit it! What are you, fucking gay? Hit it, you fucking pussy! Now that seems like not a fun time to be introduced to a drug for the first time.
Maybe that's why he's continued the weed thing throughout his whole life. He's still so scared of those wrestlers.
men.
Anytime he stops, they come back like, you pussy! You don't ever stop smoking weed!
I mean, Joe, would you not also listen to luminaries such as Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey? You gotta do what Gigolo Jimmy says, man. I mean, I've been peer pressured in my life before. My brother was in a band in Ireland, and so I used to spend a lot of my time working in a radio station, hanging out with various bands and stuff like that. So I was at a couple of parties, and I was peer pressured on many an occasion. The most cringe-inducing peer pressure that I ever experienced in my life was when a friend of mine in a band with a doink the size of a baby's arm turned to me and said, Kevin, we all like you. We think you're a pretty cool guy. Think you're pretty funny. Imagine how cool you'd be if you had this. And I opted not to go for it because I just felt embarrassed for everyone involved.
Made it so uncool.
Yeah.
It's like if your parents said that or something. It's like, no! Put you off for life.
So I was like, I'll step to one side on that front. But yeah, Rob Van Dam, not the kind of cool laid back. It was 1991. It was Jamaica. I was in a locked room with Gigolo Jimmy Del Rey. Do it, you fucking pussy!
That's so stressful as well, because I totally understand, people smoking weed to like chill out and relax and stuff, but like being peer pressured into it by a bunch of muscly men who you admire, that's so stressful. You're not gonna have a good time.
Yeah, it was amazing he ever went back to it, really, honestly,
Yeah!
from his
Probably because
description.
they kept peer pressuring him.
He never mentions going back to Jamaica, though. Maybe he's been traumatized for life. He's doing some time in WCW where he's not allowed to be called Rob Van Dam because the bookers think that it's fucking stupid that he's claiming he's Jean-Claude Van Damme's cousin.
Have they seen what he looked like at this point? He looks literally exactly like him.
They call him Robbie V instead.
Bloody awful.
Now, I always thought Rob Van Dam did sign a contract with WCW, but in the most Rob Van Dam thing ever, he kind of got away with never signing a contract just by saying, oh yeah, oh man, where is it? Oh, and he's like, they printed it out for me like 4 times.
Wow.
I just kept saying, oh, I forgot, or whatever.
Oh, I left it at home. My dog ate it.
So he never signed.
Wow.
He did wrestle for them for like, a sizable amount of time. But he kept saying like, it's no one's business but my own. Like, people come up to him saying, oh, you should sign, you should do this, you should do that. And he was very much like this early example of this beat of your own drum mentality. He's like, well, what business is it of anyone else?
Why didn't he want to sign, though? I don't understand.
Because he didn't feel like he wanted to be part of that big corporate structure.
Right.
He didn't want to be part of the big Southern experience in WCW. And he had been in Georgia, doing independent stuff, and he wanted to do other things. He wanted to go to Japan and stuff like that.
Right,
so,
yeah.
I mean, it's pretty brazen, to be that confident in knowing what you want to do. But I think in wrestling, that always works out in your favor. It'll just make you more desired.
Yeah, more interesting, more experienced.
Like, there's so many people at the moment in WWE who get released and they're going up into another place almost immediately. I kind of feel like the wrestlers who decide, I'm going to go do my own fucking thing for a bit and not show up when you expect me to.
Yeah.
Those always tend to come off a little bit better, I think. At age 25 years young, he gets brought into ECW, and it's because Sabu is working there and he's tearing up a storm. And according to Sabu, who they managed to interview for this documentary, I just wanted fucking someone to feud with, so I just brought him in. That's the only reason why. What do you reckon to Sabu as an influence on Rob?
An influence? I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't tell what influence he is on Rob and how much of it is just Rob being Rob.
So Sabu kind of took a lot of that stuff from his uncle about being very secretive. He tried to keep kayfabe as much as he could. He would never speak in promos. He didn't want anyone to know that he could speak English. I don't think he spoke English until like 2006 in WWE.
What?
When Vince was like, give this guy a microphone.
Oh.
But he also, according to Rob, Sabu would like always be in his ear telling him things. Like when he came into ECW, he's like, you don't want to talk with those people. Like, they'll bury you. Or like Rob said, like after one of his first matches in ECW, he came back and Sabu just pulled him aside straight away. When there's people wanted to congratulate him, he's like, don't listen to them. Because they're just going to want to bury you. And they're going to want to get in your head and make you do favors for them down the road.
Wow.
So I guess there is probably a point where this whole kind of beat to your own drum, though, becomes a little bit fucking weird. And I think some of that is probably might explain why he had less than a stellar reputation with people, I guess, at times.
What, because Sabu told him not to socialise?
But he wouldn't. Like, he would kind of stay away from people and stuff like that, or kind of...
But was the advice good? Maybe Sabu was right.
I mean, ECW is not necessarily full of the most noble of people and stuff like that.
No, and he knew Sabu from a really young age. Like, I'd be inclined to trust someone I'd known that long.
Yeah, that's true, in fairness. I mean, the other thing, though, that Sabu told him not to do was, like, when he would get hurt, he would tell him, don't go to the doctors because it'll get leaked and they'll find out on the internet that you're hurt. And, I mean, we watched the documentary about Rob Bay's concussions and stuff like that. Yeah. I mean, I think he probably lived to regret that, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. But I don't think that's necessarily just Sabu's fault because, I mean, he was saying himself that it was part of the culture at the time. It's like, especially in ECW, you didn't just go and tell doctors because, what, are you a pussy?
Yeah.
Getting injured?
What, you don't want to put super glue in your wounds? What, are you gay?
Yeah, there was that one time where he, like, needed a bunch of stitches and, like, the doctor was going to take him away to the hospital to get him stitched up and Sabu was like, no.
Crazy glue.
Just put crazy glue on. I was like, you're fine.
Do you ever wonder why Sabu's body looks like the way it does?
It's pretty cool though, doesn't it?
It
does look cool, like.
Yeah, that's what it is though. If Rob cut himself in his body, Sabu wouldn't be there. No, that's my gimmick, brother. You're not allowed to do that. That's for me. I mean, you go get those stitches right now. He claims that one of the biggest difficulties with him coming in was how different the fans were. Because he's like, I came from wrestling down in WCW and in Georgia, where all you had to do to get fans to cheer you was stomp the mat and go, USA! And for me as a kid, when I watched like ECW Rob Van Dam, I was shocked to find out that he was hated. Because he was only ever like a top good guy in WWE and everyone loved him all the time. And I remember my brother's friend explained to me, like, what do you think happened when a guy showed up to ECW and went, my name is Rob Van Dam, and pointed at himself with his thumbs. They started throwing litter in the ring and stuff at him.
Yeah, you see a clip in the documentary we watched of his first match in ECW, and he wins, and you just see him, like, trying to walk around through the crowd and stuff and, like, high-five people, and they're just all there with their arms crossed. The most enthusiastic is one guy sticking his double middle fingers up. Like, they hate him. They do not like newcomers, obviously.
Imagine being too cool to high-five Rob Van Dam. Imagine that.
That's ECW fans for you, though. They hate fun.
They're all 60 now. I bet you're cool now, huh? I bet you wish you fucking high-fived Rob Van Dam. ECW has their first pay-per-view in 1997, and Rob Van Dam is astonished to find out, in spite of him doing very, very well, and, you know, him having this very interesting, unique style that seems to be getting over with the fans slowly but surely, that he's not booked at that point in time. He's not put on that first pay-per-view. And he's, like, super pissed off about that, and he explains, you know, in the documentary that he thought that he was one of the things that made that show, like, unique, and it's what, you know, people want to watch ECW because of people like him.
Now, where is that coming from? Like, do they like him at this point, the fans? Because it was a bit random to go from the fans all, like, hating on him to him being like, I can't believe they didn't put me on their pay-per-view.
I mean, yeah, he was there for a good few months to a year, I would say, by the point that they went on their first pay-per-view. I mean, you could argue that ECW had so many people on its roster at that point who, like, technically were a unique part of the show.
Like, that's the whole gimmick of ECW, isn't it? It's all lots of unique people.
And they asked Hayes in the documentary, like, why didn't you book him? And he's like, because I didn't know how long I'd have Rob.
Sure.
I thought he'd be away in an instant. He'd be gone, you know. I think this is all like head games from Heyman.
Yeah.
Like he deliberately didn't book him so that he'd make Rob go all kind of paranoid or whatever, and then they could do this whole other gimmick off the back of that.
Yeah, light a fire under his arse.
I think that like fucking Heyman's as bad as Vince sometimes.
Oh yeah,
with that.
oh absolutely. If not in some ways worse.
Yeah,
I think.
Because I think Vince wouldn't pretend to be your friend like Paul Heyman.
No, he just pretend to be your dad. Totally different.
So, on the night of the pay-per-view, Chris Candido, who's meant to have a match, he gets injured, so the spot opens up. And this is one of the first things I remember seeing of Rob Van Dam was him cutting this promo and saying, like, you know, I shouldn't have even shown up tonight. This is bullshit, you know. The only reason I wrestled here tonight is because I'm worth more money here now. And I'm worth more money in other places. Which for ECW fans to say that you're, like, actively looking somewhere else is, like, sacrilege, you know. Fans were up in arms about it.
So was that work, him saying that? Or was that him just being for real?
It is kind of... It's a work, but it has elements of truth to it, I guess.
But it would have been organised by Paul Heyman and approved by him.
They claim not, but I think so, you know. And this is the weird thing about Rob. Rob would play this character then in ECW, whose whole thing was that he was this egotist, this big-headed fucker, who was kind of entertaining offers from Eric Bischoff and Vince McMahon. But maybe I'll stay here in ECW, kind of like being a big fish in a small pond, which you would think would make you the most hated person ever. But because he was so spectacular, the fans cheered him anyway.
Right.
So he was like one of the first like heels who was too cool for people to boo him, you know, and too exciting, I guess, to see. And they changed that into a character which is he's Mr. Monday Night, that he would show up on Monday Night Raw as part of this kind of, you know, this experiment to show ECW on WWF television, and then he would say like, "Oh, I'm going to Vince now. I'm Mr. Monday Night. I'm going to be this big star on Monday nights." And it was just really to kind of hype up ECW and all that. You know, you'd have Jerry Lawler would be the person who'd introduce Rob Van Dam and be like, "I hate ECW and ECW is the worst. Let me show you the spectacular wrestler you're going to see this Sunday on ECW. Here's Rob Van Dam. Oh, he's phenomenal. I hate ECW so much." So yeah, that is where Mr. Monday Night comes from, is that he had this character. All the time in ECW, he was technically a WWE guy, which is kind of weird.
That's so weird. Never would have thought that would be the case. Especially given that, like, my first introduction to Rob Van Dam was his match against John Cena, which, as far as I was concerned at the time, was on original ECW programming. And Rob Van Dam was very much an ECW guy versus John Cena, who's a WWE guy. All of that makes that match so much more complicated, knowing that actually he's an original, almost WWE guy.
I know,
and it's not even an ECW match because it's a WWE product.
He spent all of his time in ECW being known as like a WWE guy, and all his time in WWE being known as an ECW guy. It's kind of, look, fans of RVD lore, I got nothing for you. The cupboard's empty. There is no way to explain this, like, you know. But yeah, he would bury ECW like on television. He'd be like, "God, it's so great like that I get to be on Raw because like there's only like a couple of hundred people here, and I'm probably not even going to get paid tonight because Heyman can't make payroll and all that. You know, I like working for a billionaire instead." And he was being courted by Eric Bischoff. Eric did want him to come in.
I'm not surprised though, seeing as, I mean, only earlier he was being offered contracts from WCW. So yeah, I'm not surprised they still want him, if not more, because he's probably gotten even better.
Eric wanted him to be a character called Glacier, which was, I think we may have seen Glacier briefly before in WCW. He's basically a Mortal Kombat character, Sub-Zero. He's like ice themed, does kung fu and all that. So Rob could have been making six figures and thrown ice balls at people, you know, get the cool Blizzard entrance, you know?
Yay.
He becomes the TV champion in ECW, which is pretty much like his biggest claim to fame. The whole time he was in ECW, he held the TV title for nearly 2 years straight, only eventually dropping it because of injury. He won the title from Bam Bam Bigelow, and they're showing clips in the match of Bam Bam of like just the things that Rob would do in ECW, like diving into the crowd, like the sheer distance that he would take, throwing himself in there. I mean, I know you'd seen clips of him here and there before, but were you shocked to the extent that this man can jump?
Oh yeah, absolutely. He puts Shane McMahon to shame.
Yeah. It's funny that seeing Shane McMahon ripped off like one of his main moves as well. It's interesting. And that takes us to our first match of the evening. Rob Van Dam versus Jerry Lynn from Hardcore Heaven 1999. This is for the TV championship. The story of this match and the story of their feud is that Jerry Lynn is a really hard-working wrestler who's sick and tired of this braggadocious, egotistical asshole Rob Van Dam, and he wants to prove to everyone that he's the new fucking show, never mind the whole fucking show, and as a result of that, the fans hate him. Now, obviously, watching ECW on the network is somewhat of a trying experience because you don't get to hear any of that cool original music.
Yeah.
Your ears pricked up when I told you what Rob Van Dam's music was in ECW.
Yeah, you said it was Walk by Pantera.
And I think we got to see a 10-second clip where you can just about hear it.
No, I couldn't hear a thing. And I also couldn't see a thing, so...
Well, what he used to do is that he would come out to the ring to walk, and he would probably let the song loop around 2 or 3 times, because you just slowly walk around.
Yeah, it didn't work without the music.
Yeah.
He just wanders around to this really shitty stock music.
What do you think of this whole, like, the sauntering around, just high-fiving, slowly, like... Is it easy to say that he's a distracted-looking wrestler in this early tenure?
When you've got an entrance like Walk by Pantera, I feel it's allowed. Like, Sandman would take his sweet time with his entrance too, and he had Enter Sandman by Metallica. Like, I think it's what the fans want, really, isn't it?
Just to kind of take in the song, really.
Yeah.
Yeah. It is kind of a shame that I think watching ECW is kind of like a forever broken experience now. Like, I don't think you'll ever get what that's like. And I feel like I was a teenager feeling I'm never going to get what this is like, because I'd be watching all like VHS rips and it'd be all like warbly and kind of crappy and all that. So I guess you literally had to be there or be somewhere where you were watching there back in the day.
Yeah.
Rob's special pose, Joe. What is Rob Van Dam's special pose?
He flexes his biceps and points his thumbs at himself.
And says...
Rob Van Dam.
Yeah!
Yay!
Is that one of the most fun things in wrestling, or
No.
It's not? What are your thoughts on it?
There's lots of things in wrestling that are more fun than that.
Oh, but you get to move your arms.
Rob Van Dam.
Or VD. You gotta work out in the wrestling show.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's good for him. I'm like, yeah, it works, but it's quite childish and gimmicky. Like, I don't mean that in a bad way.
Yeah.
It's fine because it's wrestling, but like, I can understand why, you know, as you were saying, in ECW it maybe didn't go over very well at first.
I find it so funny that when I was a kid, the people were doing this on the playground.
Really?
Because, like, if you know Rob Van Dam, it kind of makes sense, but if you don't and you see, like, kids pointing their thumbs at themselves saying 3 letters, it is kind of strange, like, in its own way, like. The thing I like most about Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn when they start off is that they do all these kind of quick fire moves and everything misses, and then they do like a kind of a standoff and they go, wah! That is like the purest thing in wrestling as far as I'm concerned.
Am I right in thinking that is a very Jean-Claude Van Damme thing to do?
I mean, if Van Damme and Seagal faced off, I would imagine that's what would happen. They would go, wah, at the end.
Now, you were saying that he seems very distracted in his entrance. Now, I would say, not necessarily in his entrance, but just generally in his matches, he seems distracted by the crowd.
Yeah.
Like, the number of times where he just turned away from the camera to just, like, have a conversation with the crowd.
I love that he does this.
Yeah.
Because you got Jerry Lynn who's like seething in the corner, like, come on, I'm ready to go. I've got my shoes on. You said you'd be ready. And Rob Van Dam is just looking in the mirror, basically, taking his damn sweet time with it. It's fantastic. I get that he's meant to be a heel, but it just makes him seem like, I don't know, that he's operating on a different level almost to everyone else. Rob's one of those type of people who talks a lot about frequencies and vibrations.
Energies.
And energies.
Yeah.
How does that gel with you?
In what way?
I mean, do you get the energy talk, the spirituality vibe, the talking about people vibrating at certain frequencies and therefore not getting on with you, etc.?
What do you mean, do I get it? Like, do I think like that?
Do you understand that?
No.
How do people vibrate? I don't get it.
I don't know. You'd have to ask someone who's got that energy, I guess. Got those vibrations. Maybe it's like vibes. Like, you know, because vibrations could be, vibes are short for vibrations.
Are vibes short for vibrations?
Could be, couldn't it?
Interesting. I wonder what Rob Van Dam's thoughts are on the Beach Boys classic Good Vibrations.
Good vibrations.
There are lots of spins and even more smiles from Rob. And despite the fact that quite early on they're getting like they're going at like 2 dogs fighting, and Rob gets cut up and he's bleeding.
Yeah, from his eye.
Yeah.
Blech.
Doesn't stop him smiling and preening and turning around going.
Nah, he's fine.
He's kind of like he's like narrating his own match or something like that. Like he's Jerry Seinfeld or something. Like a move will happen, he'll get up and be like, why do they even call it a drop toe hold?
Someone should have that gimmick. That'd be amazing.
A Hurricane Rana? Last I checked, there's no rain due. There are mats on the outside. Thank fuck.
Barely.
They managed to land on the bits where the mats aren't.
Yeah.
Why? Oh, God.
What is the point of those mats?
I guess because they knew they were taking some big spills. Both competitors in this match, I thought, were genuinely concussed or knocked out at points. And given that we watched the documentary about Rob about struggles with concussion syndrome, or about repeated concussions, I should say, I don't think I had ever kind of considered that his style was something that would kind of... You know, I don't view him as being like a Terry Funk or a Mick Foley or a Sandman, someone who's getting whammed in the head all the time.
Really?
But if you look at it here, like the way he does land, he's taking a lot of shots to the head a lot of
Yeah,
the time.
he lands on his head and neck an awful lot. And also, anyone in ECW was taking chair shots to the head.
Yeah, other than Taz, I guess.
Other than Taz.
I mean, Rob, he has kind of a spring-loadedness to him. Like when he lands, I was wondering what you thought to his selling, if it was something that you enjoyed or not.
Love his selling. It's so good. I really love, like, there were a number of times when he was selling, I wasn't sure if it was selling, which is always the best kind, where it just like, he got knocked out, it looked like, and he would just, because it's something I've complained about before about people getting knocked out and then just like staring like at nothing.
Like an action figure, like eyes
waiting.
open, vacant expression.
Yeah, just waiting loading time for their move.
Buffering.
And instead, he just seemed genuinely like he had, like, he was vaguely waking up from an 8-hour sleep. Like, comfy concrete floor.
In the interviews that we watched, he described, like, you know, his approach to it, that he would throw himself into things, like, you know, and what is interesting about his selling is that he looks genuinely like he's ragdolling, like he's just kind of throwing himself into the wind and he's going any which way. But then you realise that he does have almost like supreme control over his body. This is probably, I'm going to say it, Joe, the most flexible wrestler we've ever done a podcast about.
Yeah, definitely. I've seen him do the splits on 2 chairs.
The White Dragon made him do the splits as like a dare, and then he did it like after 1 week in training.
Amazing.
You can do the splits, right?
No, I can't do the splits.
You have at one point been able to do the splits.
Yeah, I used to be able to do the splits. But it's one of those things that, like, that's why it's so impressive he can still do it, because he keeps up his training to this day. Because it's like one of those things that if you don't practice it all the time, it just will go.
I think it's absolutely incredible. And just like, you see people in wrestling where, you know, they do all these cool training regimes, or they're super flexible, or there's, you know, folks, how many wrestlers are doing DDP yoga, and then like when it actually comes to them wrestling, you don't see any of this flexibility necessarily come out in the wrestling itself. Whereas Rob, like, we watched a clip of him getting a pile driver where he lands on his head and he literally jumps from his head.
Right through his neck somehow.
How?
I don't know.
Has he got springs inside him?
I think he might do.
Hormone, perhaps. There says to be some sort of explanation for it. Jerry Lynn heads to the outside. I say he tumbles over the top rope and he lands straight on his fucking head. Rob tries desperately to pick him up, and when he does, there is a big pool of blood on that gym mat.
Covered in sauce.
He's a high flyer, Rob Van Dam, in the sense that he does lots of aerial moves. But something that they wanted to get across in the documentary, they said that his wrestling wasn't pretty.
I don't get that at all. It's very pretty.
I mean, in this match, I was thinking, I mean, some of it's pretty fucking nasty and ugly here, because they were taking big spills. They were splattering each other all over the mat, it felt like.
I feel like they just have to say it's not pretty because he wrestled in ECW, and ECW fans would be like, what? If you said that any ECW wrestler had a pretty style.
And you know what, as well, what's mostly not pretty about watching old ECW stuff, it's not just the fact that stuff has been dubbed over, the actual audio, the balancing, the mixing, it's like listening to old podcasts. It's like really fucking cringy bad. Like, you know, it has become more and more of a struggle to watch ECW stuff.
Yeah.
It feels like, just as my taste kind of, you know, there's a lot of modern wrestling now, so when you go back into the past and you see something where it's like, hey, why didn't you have your microphone turned up? Gotta watch a 3-hour show of it, I guess. Yeah. The Van Daminator, one of Rob's special moves, where the chair gets put in front of someone's face, and then he kicks the chair.
Oh, I didn't realize it was a special move, because it kept happening.
I mean, it was something that happened, like, once in a blue moon in WWE.
Right. Here, it happened like 10 times in one match. And it didn't just happen from him to Jerry Lynn. It happened the other way around as well. Like, I was getting actually quite a bit sick and tired of this move.
Really?
Yeah.
Because, like, I think it is one of the most spectacular things ever.
Oh, yeah, it is. So don't do it again and again and again and make it feel less spectacular.
When you got in trouble in school, you had to put out chairs when I was a boy. And I know 2 boys, one who broke their nose and one who busted up their lip by thinking, oh, I'm not going to hit you with a chair, but you can do a Van Daminator.
Oh.
You're only kicking the chair, so it's safe. It's fine.
Oh, dear.
Nothing wrong can happen. And of course, if you have it the wrong way around in the chair, they literally kick it so it folds open and smacks you right in the bridge of the fucking nose. It is a dangerous move, I think.
Yeah.
The creative freedom of Rob Van Dam was almost to a fault in this match because they were doing it over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes as well, Rob will just like do a backflip and then do a move.
I love that. Or he'll do like a forward roll.
Yeah.
I love his use of rolling.
Like his rolling thunder move where he rolls on the ground, then he jumps up and he does another big roll.
That to me is the most unique part of his style that I've not seen anyone else do in wrestling, and I've never seen anyone else do it, which is using roly-polies.
Yeah, because he does roly-polies into the corner, he does one on the ground.
The closest I can think of is Kevin Owens. Like, he occasionally will do a bit of a roll.
Yeah, the kind of corner splash.
But it's more of a splash and a cannonball, not a roll. Like, Rob Van Dam uses the momentum of his body to do things like attacks and reversals and flips and things, and it's just like he will do one move and then he will keep the momentum going by turning it into a forward or backward roll, and then he'll turn it into a second or even a third move.
I love that about it. I think even you were complaining a bit about the Van Daminator, but one thing I always loved about it was that it wouldn't just be like someone has the chair, hold it, and then he kicks it. It'll be like they're swinging, and as they're coming back from the swing, he'll then hit them. So it's really fluid stuff. You saying that about the uniqueness of his style, for a wrestler who was so like ahead of his time and all that, and I'm sure he's influential in that. I know there's a million wrestlers who probably list Rob Van Dam as their favourite wrestler, but I don't see a lot of people trying to imitate the moves of Rob Van Dam or trying to evolve.
You?
I mean, but we're talking nearly 20 years ago, these matches now at this point.
But like, I don't know. I don't know if maybe it's a case of like, it's not safe because like he wasn't trained. Is that it? Like maybe that you're taught, I just imagine like some young lad coming in trying to do Rob Van Dam's moves in like a wrestling school, right, and then being like,
do some kickboxing first.
Yeah, it's like no, you can't do any of that. It's really dangerous. Go back to basics.
I have to go train you and not break kayfabe.
Yeah,
and I'm going to pair you up with someone who's called a suicidal, homicidal, death-defying maniac for a few years.
Don't forget genocidal.
Yeah, I think he is just like genuinely, he's a unique flower. I just don't think that style could, it's so unique that if you tried to pay homage to it, you just seem like a rip-off, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. And it's because it comes so naturally to the way his body moves. Like, it's just, I don't even know if necessarily he plans a lot of the moves that he does. It just seems to be that, like, his body is made of water and he goes with the flow. Yeah,
it's true. I mean, for a high-flying guy, and oftentimes the high flyers and people are like, oh, they do all these big crazy spots, they always get labeled as people who don't sell or they don't sell enough. I think Rob is, like, almost to a fault one of the most, like, I don't know, empathetic sellers in wrestling. Like, he gets smashed through a table outside in this match, and even though he's been a dick the whole match, the way he lies there in agony and pain, the way he holds his sides and all that, he's like one of the few wrestlers who actually thinks about what would hurt if I did these things, you know? And they have this fucking outstanding match here, folks. They're doing all these like crazy flips and these like real fast sequences, and then around 20 minutes in, there is a mess up. They do fuck up. And I think Fonzie tries to hold a chair, and Rob slips, and Jerry Lynn falls off the top rope. And boy, does the crowd come alive with the "you fucked up" chants.
You fucked up.
It is so cringe. It's like they're waiting for it to, I mean, it's like they are waiting for it to happen.
I'm really glad that we've moved past that. Like, I feel when I first started watching wrestling, that was still a big thing. Like, the glee with which fans would chant things like that.
Yeah.
And I feel like these days, maybe it's just because of the pandemic and we've been all replaced by Thunderdome screens, but I feel like that isn't so much of a thing anymore. It's like it's transitioned now. We have Botchamania instead. It's a lot more nice.
Yeah, I just think like it's one thing for like having a bit of fun or whatever, you know, at a random show, or like the match has been underwhelming and like, you know, they've not delivered. But like I can't think of wrestlers who are delivering at a higher level than this.
Yeah.
And even still, it's like one slip up, they get it even louder than if they had been given a shit match.
Oh yeah.
Because it's funnier now. It's more of a slight on them that they've messed up because you dared to be good. And then they listen to the rest of you wrestlers. The "you fucked up" chants lead into Rob hitting the 5-star frog splash, but Jerry Lynn manages to reverse it into a quick cover. Rob kicks out and hits an even higher 5-star frog splash. A move which was named thusly by Joey Styles because he felt that Dave Meltzer constantly slighted ECW by not giving them high enough star ratings. That's why we have the 5-star frog splash. A spectacular move. Rob wins and retains his title against a game Jerry Lynn. First things first, what do you think to that 5-star frog splash?
Oh, I gave it 5 stars.
For the frog splash?
For the frog splash, yes.
What is it about the frog splash we've seen quite a few frog splashes in our time. D'Lo, we've seen Kevin Owens do it. I mean, everyone on the roster does it at this point, it feels like.
It definitely reminds me of some, not necessarily frog splashes that we get from other wrestlers, but like the style of it, the precision and the aerial nature of it. It reminds me of like kind of like a mixture between AJ Styles and Kevin Owens.
Yes.
Like the precision is very much like AJ Styles, the way he tucks his whole body in all the way and then comes out. It's funny, we were
superhero kind of look on it.
Yeah, it's funny, we were watching recently, Adam and his partner Alice introduced us to a YouTube video of this guy setting up a squirrel obstacle course.
Oh yeah.
And you were saying to me, you're like, I can't believe Rob Van Dam manages to like move like that. And I, as a joke, was like, yeah, he's like a squirrel. But then actually, as we were watching his matches, I realized, he really is like a squirrel. Like the way he moves his head, the way he knows exactly where he's landing, the way he tucks his body in to maneuver himself at a different angle.
It's his trajectory.
Spread out, to slow himself down. Like he really does move the way those animals do that always land on their feet.
I just think, what's so special about it is that it's a move that everyone, does in wrestling these days. It's a move that a lot of very famous wrestlers have done. But Rob would just find a way to make it more spectacular to the point where he would do things like, you expect, in wrestling, someone's going to pull them into the center of the ring. Or, we've all seen the readjustments. Everyone does that in wrestling.
Waiting for them to get into the exact perfect position in the ring for them to do the move to them.
And he would, there'd be times where he'd move people out of position. They'd be perfect in the middle and he'd, kind of turn them around. So then he would jump and he would turn mid-air.
Amazing.
There was, a time where it was, Austin and Angle were both down. Who's he going to hit? And he thinks he's going to hit Angle. And he goes over Angle and then lands on Austin on the far side of the ring. He can jump so high and so far.
Yeah, and with such precision.
Yeah. Now, you were telling me recently about there's a correlation between your jumping ability and is it how long you're going to live for your health or something like that?
Yeah, I can't remember. I watched this documentary, it was years ago, about these old people who live on an island and they're going to live forever. And part of their daily exercise is doing some, not even a big jump, but just jumping a bit.
They're ripping fat bongs and jumping real high.
And yeah, ever since I watched that, I've been like, oh, okay, I really want to be good at jumping so I can live forever.
I think Rob Van Dam's 5-star kind of it emphasizes why he is special. It's taking something and how he lands afterwards when he grabs it. We saw his stomach. We used to always make fun of him that it's Rob would do this move and then he'd have a sore tummy and be but Rob doing the 5-star frog splash, this it tells you how long we've been in lockdown. It just made me really want to go on holiday because the first thing I thought of
going
was
to a pool,
jumping really high into a pool and then landing and then going I need to go to the buffet.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. You need a big slice of pizza afterwards, and some chips.
So 5 stars for the frog splash.
Yeah.
Rob Van Dam and Jerry Lynn, which was probably the ugliest, beautiful match I've seen in a long, long time. It's a classic in my mind. But how did it fit with you going back in time to this gritty ECW encounter?
I liked it. The wrestling was definitely good. I've got no qualms about that. But to me, the pacing was slightly off. And I think it was to do with that fact that move, the Rob Van Daminator.
Van Daminator,
yeah, that one. The fact that it happened again and again and again, it threw the pacing off for me, I think. So my harsh rating is 3.5 stars.
You heard it here.
And it was good, but could be better.
I see that and it's it's a band that is amazing, and then you see them live and it's a little bit grittier and a little bit kind of thrashier and there's a charm to it.
It makes you like them more, but your friend who you brought with you to watch them for the first time is like, yeah, I don't really get it.
Yeah, and you have to take them at home and show them the single instead.
Yeah, and they're like, oh, now I get it.
I wonder if there will come a time where I feel we're actually maybe in that time where that kind of the charm of ECW, that kind of grittiness is actually almost a barrier to entry as opposed to being I think we'll come into a post-irony point in ECW where it's oh no, actually watching something that's quite lo-fi is really great because wrestling's too overproduced and all that. But I kind of feel like every time I go back and watch old ECW, I kind of have to put on a bit more and more of a brave face every time that it's not necessarily... even though I'm delighted for everyone in their creative freedom doing exactly what they want to, but Rob, face the fucking camera. Do you mind?
Yeah,
Do you mind facing the hard camera once, please? And not just talking to your buddy in the front row you probably got to get high with afterwards. Everyone looked like they were having a great time.
Yeah, they did.
Back to the documentary, and Paul Heyman says that they relied on Rob Van Dam unlike any other wrestler they had on the roster, because they could put on an absolute dog shit show at ECW, and then Rob would come out and have one match and it'd be great and everyone would go home happy.
Wow. You should probably pay that man.
I was going to say, yeah, there's someone who's earned his paycheck, right? Also, if you went to a fucking wrestling show and it was all shit and one match was good and you went home afterwards, you know what you'd probably say? God, that was a shit show. That one match was really good, though. You wouldn't know that was a great show.
I don't know, maybe ECW fans. Who knows?
But ECW fans, many things, but
they would have gotten
discerning.
It's a different show, though, isn't it? Because a lot of ECW was just watching these tired, stoned men walk around to famous music and smash their heads on things.
I remember one time, it was when Rob just went to WWE and Heyman was doing an interview to try and put him over, and he's like, this man, Rob Van Dam, do you know that when he would wrestle on ECW, the fans would be queued up around the block, they'd be chanting his name non-stop, then the show would start, the opening match, they'd be chanting his name all the way through intermission, then Rob would come out, they'd chant his name during his entrance, during his match, after his match, into the main event, in the drive home, in bed, alone, they would be... That sounds horrible!
Yeah, we thought what was bad.
Yeah, and I don't think, in fairness, I don't think Rob Van Dam would want that.
No.
I think the idea that ECW was this three-ring circus that entirely centered upon Rob Van Dam feels like something that Paul probably said to Rob many times.
Yeah, but he's probably saying the same thing to the Dudley Boys. This is the Dudley Boys show.
It seems so disingenuous from Paul in this documentary, you know? I get that he's probably the biggest Rob Van Dam fan in the world, but it felt like he was telling us stuff here that he told Rob to get him to not leave.
Yeah, and to get him to, not pay him.
Yeah, and he was someone who, all throughout the Attitude Era, people were like, is he going to go? Is he going to go? Everyone wanted to pay him, and he didn't. He never went. He never left. He stayed to that company right until to the end.
But, as we covered in our ECW episode and our Paul Heyman episode, that's the power of not only Paul Heyman, but also I think the culture of ECW.
Absolutely,
if you're one of the boys, which he was, you didn't just leave the ship because it was, things were hard. You stuck by your boys, you stuck by the promotion.
Solidarity to a fault.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you were all in this together.
A lot of that going around in wrestling these days, Well, I think the documentary is so disingenuous here when they say, Rob, he gets injured, he hurts his ankle. I actually had to see footage of the ankle break that he got, and it was so... he was just sliding to the outside of the ring, his foot just got caught under him and went, yank,
it's always the most underwhelming moments that cause injuries in wrestling.
So, probably the reason why I didn't see it until 20 years later. And then they say Rob came back 5 months later to a company in the midst of financial turmoil. It's that is the company's genesis.
Yeah.
ECW started because a lad in Philadelphia mortgaged his house 3 times. How is that not financial turmoil? I found out that in the end of ECW that Rob was owed 6 figures.
Wow.
Bankruptcy papers that I found ages ago. We talked about ECW's bankruptcy way back on this show, and it's 150 grand is what he was owed at the end.
Wow.
And that's on top of that he was owed. He didn't get proper merchandising royalties or stuff. He didn't get his pay for his video game appearance or all that stuff. And I don't know. Cutting to Paul Heyman and him saying, Rob wouldn't have wanted to cash those checks. I would give him a check and he wouldn't cash them because he said, no, ECW has to live another day. I considered Rob an investor in ECW. And I think Rob considered himself an investor. And I don't know. I feel like Rob considers himself someone who was owed 6 figures.
Yeah.
I think Rob considers himself someone who didn't cash those checks because he knew that if he didn't cash those checks, there would be no company. And that doesn't make him an investor or a nice guy or your best mate.
God, Paul Heyman, you can imagine him in today's economy, having a startup Silicon Valley company. We're all a family here. You can cash your check, but we may not be around then.
I mean, my main thing I thought about this was like, there's a reason why Paul doesn't like to talk about ECW anymore.
Yeah.
It's because when he has to circle the wagons and start talking about this, it makes him seem like he's so full of shit, you know? And he says that the ECW's closure affected Rob in ways that it took 20 years for him to reflect on properly.
What?
I mean, the only thing I could say for that is the genuine shock, I think, of finding out the extent to which Rob has struggled with concussion syndrome.
Yeah.
And specifically his vision. This was something in the movie Headstrong that we watched, where the pitch of the movie is Rob's going to go do stand-up comedy for 8 days on a little tour. It's like Rest and Road Diaries, but with stand-up comedy. And then you find out that it's like the worst trip of his life because he's got problems from a concussion that just won't go away. And, you know, the end of the movie is kind of him doing all this work to try and get his vision back to where it is. And he's like rehabbing his eyes. You know, using like special laser targets and stuff like that to try and get... You know, the reason you see Rob Van Dam wearing glasses all the time is because he goes cross-eyed now.
Oh,
you know, and he can't actually... Or the lights are so damaging to him and all that. So, the ECW, I think... You know, that match I showed you, that was kind of the standard fare for Rob. He would take it to the next level.
Yeah.
And, you know, he teamed with Sabu a lot in ECW as well. There was probably the worst injury I ever heard of, him and Sabu in a tag match. They both jumped off at the same time through two lads who were on tables. Tables exploded because two guys flying through tables at the same time. One of the splinters flew up.
No.
And it caught him in his eye.
No.
And it severed his eyelid almost entirely.
No. I know this story.
You know the story.
No, don't tell me about the eyelid.
He thought that it was a piece of loose skin on his forehead, so he tried to rip it off, and then he nearly ripped it off.
You better not be talking about that eyelid.
Hey, now that Joe's away, let's talk about what we really want to talk about, guys. Fucking eyelids, am I right? Yeah! Get him! So 2001, ECW files for bankruptcy. WCW has also gone under and been purchased by WWE, which means there's an invasion on hand, which means Rob gets brought into WWE finally after all of these years. And he was kind of brought in as a bad guy, but the fans loved him irrespective of that fact.
How did the whole Mr. Monday Night thing transition from being in ECW to this?
No reference to it whatsoever.
But, like, he would have been doing that this whole time, right?
I mean, in ECW, he would have been, you know, Mr. Monday Night, and then around probably towards the end of his closure, he was more known as Mr. Pay-Per-View, I guess. But it's just something that they didn't follow through on. It just kind of was something that was left in the past. They made very little reference to the fact that Rob had... I don't think they made any reference to the fact that Rob or ECW had been involved in WWE at all when they did the invasion. Okay. One of many kind of weird flaws with it. I mean, I tried to explain to you this invasion, what happened. Do you think you could recount what happened in the invasion? Broad strokes.
So, Shane bought WCW, and then they were brought in as baddies.
I think they were goodies originally.
Okay. And then Stephanie bought ECW.
Yep.
And then they came in as baddies. And then they teamed up with WCW for some reason.
Yeah, now, when they were explaining this in the documentary, saying, like, WCW and ECW, and you turned to me and were like, wait, what? But they hate you. What?
I know, I cannot think of two brands at more polar opposites of each other who were around at the same time than those two.
I mean, but I can't think of two people more like each other than Shane McMahon and Stephanie McMahon, Joe. So it kind of makes sense when you think about it like that.
There you go.
Know? One of the early storylines they wanted to do with Rob, and this is an early example of him kind of kicking back against storylines they had proposed, was that Vince thought Rob needed more of a personality, quite frankly. How do you think the best way to do that is? He wanted to do...
Wear a hat. Very fair if Rob Van Dam was the same character, except he wore, like, one of those really offensive Jamaican hats with dreadlocks on it.
Come on, pal, it's Rastafarian. What's wrong? Now, he wanted... I just love the Vince McMahon. This is his idea to make something more interesting. He thought it'd be funny if Rob had a love interest angle with Stephanie.
Oh, that's his idea for everything. And why don't you fancy my daughter?
It's like Rob telling the story in a shoe interview where he's like, he goes up to the creative team and he's like, I don't know, I'm not really kind of comfortable with this. And Triple H is like, why aren't you comfortable with it? And he's like, well, like, I'm married. And Triple H is like, yeah, and? He's like, well, and she's married, like, to you. Like, don't you think
You
it's
better
weird?
fuck my wife.
Why aren't you man enough to get in there and pretend to fuck my wife? God damn it, Rob, working the system.
Is that why Triple H hates him so much?
I don't know why Triple H hates him. He's got a bee in his bonnet, and there's plenty of instances of Rob like rubbing against the system in the wrong way. And Triple H never liked Rob, and Rob went out of his way in interviews to talk about what a prick he thought Triple H was. Like, the best story I found about it was Triple H, Mr. Teetotal,
Yeah.
never drunk, never done any drugs in his life, except when I'm having a glass of whiskey with one of the boys, when the Undertaker would pour me one for one of the boys. But there was one time apparently in a creative meeting where Rob, it came back to him that Triple H had made a big joke about him in front of everyone,
right?
About him being a stoner, and
right?
That, can't trust him because he's going to smoke weed and he's a fuck up and all that. And it was that stupid stoner Rob Van Dam. And Rob went to him and he was like, why did you make that joke? And he's like, come on, Rob, just making a joke, it's what buddies do, it's what friends do, making a joke. And Rob said to him, do you genuinely think in your head that we're friends, yet alone good enough friends for you to make that joke in front of everyone? So, like, there's all these instances of him, like, just being like, why? Like he wouldn't go on the Tribute to the Troops tour.
Oh, wow.
He refused.
On what basis?
Because you don't have to go.
Right, okay.
They were told it was voluntary. And he's like, oh, it's voluntary? It's Christmas? Guess what? I'm going home. Because it's fucking Christmas. And then he gets brought into a special meeting with Vince. And Vince is like, Rob, people, they find that the trip over to Iraq changes them. And he's like, do you want me to seriously get in a fucking freight cargo fucking plane with like all of SmackDown roster or whatever and fly over to a fucking war zone and get shot at to do a tribute to the tree? He's like, no, I'm not doing it. And then they hold a big talent meeting where they're like, really proud, of course, everyone who's coming on to go and support the troops this year. Obviously, Rob, you're not going. That's your choice. It's not mandatory, of course. In front of everyone.
Wow.
Have you ever been in a job like that where they're like, no, we don't force you to do things, but there's a culture here that we all go for drinks on Wednesdays at 5, and you have to go.
And we name and shame anyone that doesn't go.
Fuck that.
I hate that so much.
Fuck that.
So manipulative.
You ever want to find a surefire way to make people not want to socialize with you? Is just like weird rules that aren't rules.
Yeah.
To prop up your kind of social fucking endeavors.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, like, I empathize with that greatly. But I can't imagine telling Vince McMahon you don't want to go to support the troops in 2001 after 9/11 is a pretty hot deal, like.
No.
It's pretty ballsy.
Oh, it's really ballsy. It makes me like him a lot more.
There were two things that were really working against Rob Van Dam apparently during this time. And one of them was his biggest supporter, which was Paul Heyman. And Paul, remember in our episode, we talked about how he was, doing writing for the television, and, he had issues with Stephanie, and he had issues with Vince. Because writers and producers didn't like Paul, they would take that out on Rob.
Oh.
And because Paul thought that Rob was great, and thought that people were trying to hold him back, he'd be also in his ears saying, like, oh, you don't want to trust this writer.
Right.
Just like Sabu, I guess.
Yeah.
You don't trust these guys, you don't trust those guys. And then you have people like Steve Austin and Jim Ross who thought Rob was great. And like, well, he's obviously the top guy. Next top guy, we'll get him over, right? And then, well, no, these other people don't like him so much. So it just becomes this fucking politics kind of bullshit. I think it's...
All men hate each other, brother.
Well, you know what it is, Joe, is that you get these men in this environment, the jealousy is what it is.
The jealousy comes out. They just can't. They can't work together.
Yeah, but it's just this. They haven't got the mentality for the man. I don't think.
Why you shouldn't have more than a few men in the workplace.
I just love that in wrestling, all right, which is like a silly world. We can agree, in to put it mildly. That the more you try to be like, oh, I don't want to rub anyone the wrong way, or I'm just going to do my own thing, or no, I'm not going to do that. Like, the more you try to be the kind of just the person who just wants to get involved, the more involved you will get, and the more in the middle of like trying to avoid bullshit means you'll get involved in bullshit more. It's like it's like prison, I guess.
Yeah, I was just thinking it's like prison or the mafia or anything like that. Any type of like toxic masculinity sort of club where you have to pay your dues and you have to like do what you're told, and there's a hierarchy in place, and if you don't fit in nicely, you're gonna get beef.
The best, like, subtle dig and also kind of depressingly true thing that Rob has ever said about, like, the WWE system is that the most successful wrestlers of all time have been the pieces of clay who are like, just mow me, or, whatever you want. Like,
Yeah,
you
like
tell
The
me
Miz.
how to do it. Yeah, exactly. If you've got enough of your own ideas and all that, but let them decide what to do with those ideas.
Yeah,
And
be flexible.
that's not really Rob's style, I guess.
Yeah.
Thanks to our next match. Ooh, boy. I'm excited about this one. We're talking about Rob Van Dam taking on Jeff Hardy. This is an Invasion 2001, where once again, Rob is meant to be the bad guy, and the fans love him.
I don't get why they keep wanting to make him a heel.
Something about this guy, Joe, rubs me the wrong way. Like, he's a gateway wrestler, Joe, is what it is. Like,
I don't get it as well because I love heels and I'm always more fond of people playing a heel than a face.
Yeah.
But my God, Rob Van Dam to me just screams good guy.
He does. He's likable. Particularly, I think it's one thing in the ECW environment, but particularly in the WWE environment. It's like at the start where they're trying to portray him as this like JR says the word egotistical like 20 fucking times. Like, sometimes he backs it up, be that as it may, egotistical nonsense,
Get it? He's affable.
Yes, affable is a very good word for him.
And you can't be an affable heel.
No. I don't think, I think there were some clips of him that we watched earlier today, again, the oddball tag teams that he found himself in. He's very affable in those.
Yeah.
The great segment with him and Triple H, which is basically like, if Joe Graham could cut a promo on Triple H, what would happen?
Pretty much.
Calling him Mr. Muscly Man and saying that he spits cool. There is a tension between Rob Van Dam and Jeff Hardy at the start of this one. I would say it's a borderline sexual tension, Joe.
Yeah, they should just kiss already. Michael Cole compares Rob Van Dam's moves to that movie, The Matrix. I don't know why.
I don't know what movie you're talking about, Michael. It doesn't make any sense to me, sorry. There is a straight-up showcase at the start between these two to show you, what it is that they can do.
This is when they jump on the barricade
Yes.
to show off, and then they both fall off without even hitting each other, and it's really pathetic. But no.
I mean, many people could argue that WWE never truly got or understood Rob Van Dam and his appeal, and it was quite, a big emblematic moment of that was when Rob Van Dam does the thumbs and Michael Cole goes, "There's Rob Van Dam saying he's number one again." When you say you're number one 3 times with 2 thumbs.
Yeah, and point at yourself, yeah.
Fucking hell. Rob Van Dam genuinely looks delighted when he hears people in the crowd chanting his name.
Oh, yeah. He loves it.
I think that's maybe a part of Rob that maybe he is... he wanted to be in front of that big crowd.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like... I don't say it's a shame that he didn't get to do it sooner, but it's like... If he didn't have the voices in his ear, I feel like he could have probably been in front of this crowd a lot sooner, still under his own terms. Because what I find is strange is that he stays all this time in ECW, kind of like, I'm going to do things my way. No, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to go there. I'm going to do things my way. And then the company becomes bankrupt and he's brought into another company where it's like, well, you're not doing things your way now. And then he spends most of his career not doing things his way, the way he wants them to be done necessarily.
Well, what's the difference between this way and his way?
Well, I think it's less in the match thing. In the matches, he still gets to do the stuff that he wants to do. He still gets to do his interview with Triple H where he's like, I do cool moves, man.
I'm amazing.
I'm great. But it's the promos, I think. The fact that he would just say, cool, whatever, man, or shrug.
All right, Matt Riddle stuff.
I don't think that he's happy that one of the most iconic images of him is just the one of him shrugging, going, "Hey, bro."
Oh no, that's the one that I picked for the artwork.
But for me though, I think he should own that because I feel like he's transcended beyond that now. That is part of who he was. They tried WWE trying to figure out how to book a stoner character in 2001 and 2 is hilarious to me.
Yeah.
And the fact that you can see Rob kind of almost about to fucking burst his whole laughing every time he has to deliver something like, "Hey, I've got a stinky skunk in my basement, bro." I mean, it's almost less cringe than them doing it in 2021 with Riddle.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Because what's your excuse in 2021? I mean, there's enough mainstream culture out there talking about marijuana in a non-cringe-inducing way.
Don't need the implied.
Dude, when you said skins, I don't know if you meant skins or the new Call of Duty pack of skins that's available now from Monster Energy, because that's what I do. I have 3 children. So thanks for that, Matt. Yeah, very, very good. Yeah. We have a big, massive king-sized ladder that gets brought out in this one.
Yeah, I believe it's supposed to be 20 feet tall.
Fucking hell.
And Jeff Hardy climbs up it, and then
He's just pushed off.
He's just pushed off. He's actually just Rob Van Dam comes in and just topples the ladder, and he falls all the way to the outside of the ring.
Fucking hell. Rob gets himself a chair. We get the Van Daminator, and this was an extra spicy one because did you notice there was like this little kind of goatee-shaped gap in the stage where they were? There's like this little kind of concrete pit. So after Jeff got the Van Daminator, he just fell into this scary hole.
Yeah, like this croissant-shaped hole.
I mean, these guys, even though they are, you know, they're very skilled athletes and all that, it feels like there's no way to do what they're doing without hurting yourself a little bit.
Yeah, isn't that wrestling though? To a large extent.
Yeah, I guess so. It's the unavoidable cost of professional wrestling.
Like, it's gonna hurt. Like, but that's the thing though, isn't it? It's quite impressive that Rob Van Dam didn't get injured as much as, you know, maybe he could have been.
Yeah.
Because, like, yeah, absolutely, that style is hard hitting, and I can only imagine how many scrapes and welts and bumps and bruises he would end up with at the end of every single match.
And he can still wrestle. He can still go to this day. I
Wow.
mean, he wrestles less, but he can still wrestle, you know, even though he's in his 50s now. We get the Van Daminator in the corner, but Jeff Hardy counters with a DDT. The sell from Rob off this DDT.
He bounces off his head. Which makes me
that.
think that Rob Van Dam, as part of his workout, probably does headstands a lot
Oh, shit, you reckon?
to strengthen his neck and head. Yeah, probably.
I don't know, I just feel like doing that, I'd break my neck or something like that.
Yeah, you're a very different shape to him, though. I think he's slightly more designed to stand on his head.
Yeah, I'm more prone to topple, both
Yeah.
stood up, but particularly if I'm upside down on my head as well. Oh wait, so do you like, if you do headstands, are you like, I'm just got a really stupid question, but like, do you put your hands out as well?
So, the basic headstand is you put your hands down, but the advanced headstand is you take your hands up again off the floor once you're on your head.
How,
So
Joe?
there are people, and I would guess Rob Van Dam can do this, is do a headstand without using his hands, because you've just got that core strength throughout your whole body at that point that you can keep yourself up just kind of with balance, really.
I think that's like one of the things about Rob is I heard that he was what's the word? Just right, he was surprisingly heavy, like that he had a lot of muscle, like because you know he's a high flyer and he does lots of dives and all that. People assume he's probably like what 200 pounds, whatever. He's like 250, 280, that kind of bracket.
Yeah, I was so amazed when I found out how much he weighed.
He's pure fucking muscle.
Yeah.
And again, a guy who's wearing a singlet and bicycle shorts, you just make these assumptions as a wrestling
Yeah,
fan. That,
and he looks very like his body shape, especially like at this type of era where he is for this match in 2001. His body shape is not particularly like, even though he is very dense, he doesn't look beefed up. He doesn't look like the rest of the lads around this time where they're all on steroids and super hench. Like, he looks quite trim.
The broad stroke, they're all on fucking steroids.
Well, come on, they mostly are, aren't they, at this point?
Or some sort of equivalent.
Yeah.
But you know, Rob is he floats. You know, he has in complete control of his entire body, it feels, at all times.
And like, he's got the body shape. I'm not necessarily like later in his career, but like at this point, he's got the shape of more of like an amateur wrestler to his body. Like, he looks like almost like a young Kurt Angle or someone.
Yeah, or like young Stu Hart or something like that. He has that, like, he's not ripped, but he looks like he could probably bounce pennies off any part of his body.
Yeah.
The Swanton gets avoided from Jeff Hardy, and then Rob puts the title on Jeff, and then hits the 5-star frog splash, which made Joe scream, like a squirrel!
He is like a squirrel.
Rob Van Dam picks up the win in what was his first match in the WWF, kind of being brought in officially under contract now. And I remember he was the talk of the town. Like, you know, everyone who was still watching wrestling after all this kind of invasion stuff, Rob Van Dam was pretty much everyone's favourite wrestler in school. Everyone was doing the thumbs. Even people who didn't watch wrestling were doing that. You know, 5-star frog splashes into the swimming pool, all immediately regretted. You know?
Ow, my tummy.
Now, Jeff Hardy and Rob Van Dam in a hardcore match, when I mentioned that to you, you went, oh, so obviously there was expectations. How did you get on with RVD and Jeff?
Oh, I thought this match was really awesome. It felt quite short. I don't know if it was short, but it felt
12, 13 thereabouts?
right. Yeah, so it was on the shorter side then. Yeah, it felt short and sweet and really, really, really good, scary wrestling. very painful looking, this match. Like, that was my main takeaway, was ouch.
Yeah.
I gave it 4 stars.
Nice.
I really, really liked it, but oh boy, they did go hardcore.
I'm sure at least one of those stars are probably given the fact that, that both men are alive and well in 2021.
Yes,
and,
definitely.
not struggling or anything like that.
Yeah, they're okay. They're still wrestling even.
I'm not gonna lie, I struggled with Rob picking matches in some respects because, like, I wanted to show you him and Jeff in a ladder match.
Yeah.
And I want to show you him and Jeff in their other ladder match. I want to show you him and Eddie Guerrero in his ladder match.
We'll show all ladder matches.
I mean, I just feel with Rob, there's a lot of times I could show you matches where the big takeaway is, wow, that's fucking great. But I'm glad you got, like, that from the ones that I did happen to show you so far. Rob feels like he's spinning his wheels in WWE in that he can't seem to crack into the upper echelon. Like, quite early on when he was brought in, Steve Austin thought that he was a top-end guy. And we watched some of their little clips together, and they did have, like, really good comedic chemistry, I felt, the two of them. And it almost actually, it worked with the cool whatever man stuff, having Steve been all riled up and then Rob being like, cool man, or whatever. What do you mean, whatever? What? Whatever? What? But this is the classic thing that happens. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, where you being laid back has been equated to you having, like, no passion or something like that. Someone doesn't think that you're not passionate about something because you have a not necessarily laissez-faire, but you're kind of calm about something, Like, I was in many schools when I was teaching where if someone was in charge and they were freaking out and the world was falling apart to them, if everyone else wasn't at that level as you're suddenly, like, kind of a lazy son of a bitch or whatever.
Wow.
Like, I'm struggling, we all should be struggling, that type of a thing. And I think Rob's kind of non-confrontational attitude worked against him. He talked about how seeing people in the locker room being like, no one loves this business more than I do. And him being like, yeah, you probably do love it more. Was his admission to, like, not having that specific level of passion, was that shocking to you?
It was quite surprising, yeah, given that he's so good at wrestling. Normally when someone is that good, they're that good because they love it more than everyone else. Like, they put that much work into it, which just, I think, goes to show just how gifted he is that he doesn't have to love it that much to be that good. And no wonder people didn't get on with him, because I think that's like one of the biggest flexes you can do, is just be like, yeah, this business is fine and all that, but, like, I just do it, for fun occasionally, and, like, you love it, whatever, it's fine, like, good for you. It's kind of like almost like it's like a big flex.
And I think you hit the nail on the head there, because if I told you, he didn't get on with Triple H, it feels like, even though we've not done a Triple H episode, you know enough about Triple H to be like, yeah, well, that kind of tracks. I mean, Triple H, fucking Mr. Office or whatever. But the other person who he really didn't get on well with and had quite bad blood with was Jericho.
Really?
Yeah. Now, I know early on in their encounters that Jericho was on the receiving end of more than a few of Rob Van Dam's extra snug and stiff maneuvers. Now, Rob blamed his training on the Sheik of the fact that everything they did was kind of snug and stiff. But in his first year, I'd say he split open 3 or 4 wrestlers.
Whoa.
Just in spin kicks and stuff, and he'd smack him across the head. There's actually, like, a big match with Jericho where you can literally hear him screaming at Rob going, slow down! Like Vader, Ease up! You should have gotten Vader or Ken back in to run in with Rob. Ease up!
Oh my god, Ken Shamrock versus Rob Van Dam, that would have been fucking awesome.
Don't tantalize me. I mean,
it could still happen.
Yeah, and my favourite one was he also split open Kurt Angle around this time.
Right.
And Kurt Angle's wife at the time, who had a blog, wrote this big long piece about how, Vince, in my mind, you shouldn't be pushing this guy Rob Van Dam because he's unsafe.
Wow.
He doesn't know how to work with the boys because he's splitting everyone open. He's a danger to everyone. And yeah, just, guy comes in, he's a bit laid back. And that's it. If he came in, he's Mr. fucking serious, and he was kicking people and splitting them open, they would have been like, whoa, this guy.
Yeah.
But the fact that he's Mr. laissez-faire, laid back, and then he's kicking people and splitting them open, well, we got a problem now.
It makes him an easy target, I guess, because, like, if you act like that, I think one of the things is that people mistake passivity for weakness, as opposed to a deliberate decision to not participate in that type of aggression.
Yeah, I think it's like conscientious objector almost in some respects, but he doesn't want to have to explain why, and I totally get that.
Yeah.
He says in the documentary he felt that all throughout his time in WWE, there was always someone who was trying to change him or change what the nature of his character was.
Well, that's wrestling, mate.
And he says he never got to be him, you know? I feel that's overly harsh, though, because I feel like a lot of what I love about Rob Van Dam, I saw when I was watching, you know, all the Rob Van Dam I watched apparently was him being changed and him was just saying cool and whatever, man, and all that. But I feel like it's, yeah, him saying cool or whatever is a bit lame at times, but he is endearing in a lot of those clips and all that. I mean, him and Kane had some real good times together.
Yeah,
maybe.
they were some really great clips you were watching there.
Well, he's talking about how he doesn't understand that Kane's mask is important to him because only Spider-Man needs his masks to be powerful or whatever. Like, or how he got Kane hungry hippos to work out his aggression before they got out into the ring. The one that stood out to me in one of the docs that we watched was someone coming up to Rob at one point. It was after Rob had said, like, how come I've not gotten a chance to be champion yet? Like, you know, why haven't you taken a run with me or taken a chance? And one of the writers gone, well, Rob, we're at the point now where I think you need to start developing a personal relationship with Vince. And he's like, what do you mean? He's like, you know, you should be talking to him. You should, like, you know, try and meet him when you can.
It's good advice.
But he's like, why? He's my boss. Why should I be his friend?
Business. Well, isn't he friends with Paul Heyman?
Yeah, but like him and Paul will get stoned before shows. I guess that's different.
He needs to get stoned first. I see.
Do you think him and Vince ever got stoned together?
I think they did. I can totally imagine that.
But like, I think you're right though. Kind of at that point, it's one thing if it's people where you're like, I don't like this guy Triple H or this guy or that guy. But when it's like people saying, you know, this is the one thing that's holding you back. Like Vince McMahon thinks you're not interested enough. And I get being so skillful that you feel like you don't have to explain yourself. But something I had to learn, you know, in my life over and over again is that no matter how fucking special you think you are, no matter what your position is, you have to always be selling yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, you know, networking.
That's it. Like, we do a lot of freelance stuff. And if you don't hustle, you don't sell yourself. Like, unfortunately, your talents and skills, your friends or your colleagues or your well-wishers will tell you you're great. But if you have to sell yourself to a boss or to an employer, like, it sucks, but it's not like a sellout thing. It's just like, it's kind of how the working world works almost.
Exactly, yeah. If he thinks it's going to be different in any other business, he's wrong.
Do you think it's entitled behaviour?
No, I think it's lazy behaviour. He doesn't want to do it. I don't blame him. Like, in
There's a clear distinction there, like, exactly. Like, because he's not pissed off, I think. If he was pissed off, it would seem like he's entitled.
Yeah, I'm sure he'd be fine with hanging out with Vince, like, as you were saying, if they could share a joint or whatever, but, like, because it would always be, I'm sure, in a business environment, like a business setting, that probably doesn't appeal to him because he's the type of person who doesn't love and live wrestling. He goes home for Christmas.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have to go to Iraq if he doesn't really want to. Like,
yeah.
Lucky you. Like, you don't have to go to a war zone. I think it's like, it's something that he does specifically mention in the WWE documentary, which I was surprised by, is that he specifically acknowledges, he's like, my privilege as a WWE superstar meant that I got to do a lot of stuff that I definitely wouldn't have gotten to do otherwise. Like, it afforded me a position and notoriety that I wouldn't have received otherwise. So I think, yeah, there is a fine line between lack of passion and just being someone who doesn't want to toe the fucking company line all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
thought it was bullshit, and it is.
Yeah. He pitches, unfortunately while he's still injured, the original ECW One Night Stand, the reunion show, which he thinks is a great idea. And it only, in my mind, watching it now, made me realise the reason why everyone loved it as a reunion show and why it was so special and all that is because it happened exactly 4 years after ECW went out of business, when everyone still kind of looked the same, everyone was kind of still in everyone's mind and memories. I just think anytime anyone's trying to do a reunion show or a Legends Night or a Remember When type of nostalgia wrestling show, bear that in mind. Like, is it... I mean, could you imagine doing something nostalgic for 2017 now?
Oh, God, that would be so weird.
God, remember the UK Championship Tournament, Joe? Like,
I mean, it was great.
It was great, yeah.
Can't do that now.
Before we found out about them all.
Yeah.
Remember being naive?
Oh, yeah.
Remember just not even thinking to ask any questions?
Yeah, just not even considering it.
he talks about, like, you know, Vince is actually quite upfront in the documentary about, like, you know,
Vince is fucking everywhere in this documentary, and it really, really was weird because, like, we often watch documentaries for these episodes, and Vince is never anywhere to be seen unless it's the really big stars, and he is the number one person they interview throughout this whole documentary. They talk to him more than they talk to Rob Van Dam. Like,
were you surprised by what Vince had to say about Rob?
Not really. I was just more surprised that he was there and had so much to say. Like, the stuff he was saying was fairly standard company line stuff of, like, he was a great competitor, and I saw great things from him, but ultimately it was to me, so quite frankly. But
yes, that's...
yeah, basically that. But yeah, no. So it didn't surprise me what he was saying. Just how much of it there was.
I didn't realize that, like, it was Rob's whole idea, like, that he pitched it, like, and,
yeah, I know,
and he pitched it to Vince as well. I think that's pretty ballsy, though, like, to be like, you know, I'm not going to have the relationship, or I'm not going to be Mr., you know, get your coffee, Vince, or whatever, but I'm still going to knock on his door and say, hey, I've got an idea for you to make a lot of money, and yeah, he made a lot of money out of that one. It's probably the best use of a property that Vince McMahon has bought probably ever. It's the most money he's ever made out of something that he bought.
Wow.
You know, than just buying it and keeping it in a fucking warehouse. He made more money out of this reunion show than out of, like, half the fucking people he signed in the last 5 years.
Whoa.
You know, it feels like. But Rob, unfortunately, is injured for the first one-night stand. But come the second one-night stand in 2006, and Rob at this point has won the Money in the Bank contract, and he has announced that he's cashing it in against John Cena. And I just love this, that you're saying, hey, Rob, your Money in the Bank, you're going to cash it in at the ECW show. And he's like, I was starting to think that maybe there were some ideas about me maybe getting something, but I wasn't taking it very seriously. Rock bottom expectations his whole time, it felt like he had.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta, I guess.
In this business, yeah, you probably should.
Aim low, folks.
Also, especially if, like, everyone's whispering in your ear being like, yeah, everyone's shit. Nothing works out the way you hope it will. All your dreams will die.
ECW's One Night Stand 2006. I mean, dreams didn't die there. Dreams came true. It was an early favourite for you, and they recapped it here, minus some of the shenanigans that happened in the match. Rob saying it was the crowning achievement in his career, like the best moment. It was the sweetest thing, like being able to wrestle an ECW style match with a star like John Cena, involve the crowd like that. What is it, even looking back now, that makes that match so special in your mind?
I'd need to watch it again with my current eyes, because I've genuinely not seen that match since when I first started watching wrestling.
Wow.
And at the time, I could tell there was something special about it, but I couldn't tell what it was. And it wasn't until, I think it's when we did the John Cena Revisited episode, when I realised how much of that match was John playing off the crowd.
Which you wouldn't have thought at the time.
Which I wouldn't have thought at the time, because that was when we were peak, oh, John Cena's shit, lol,
He's
Cena
cancer.
wins. Yeah, John Cena's cancer. And I think, like, the fans at the time weren't giving John enough credit for, like, the decisions he was making in that match.
And John loved, apparently, all of it. He thought it was great.
Yeah, and I'm not surprised, because actually that match reminds me, looking back, of the match that he had with AJ Styles, and, like, it gave John a chance to play a character that he doesn't normally get to play in the WWE.
Yeah.
And it gave him a chance to put someone over and wrestle a style that he doesn't normally get to wrestle.
I think, like, it is Rob's crowning achievement, but I would think if you ever wanted a moment's look back in time and go, that's when John Cena proved that he could do that top guy shit, that fucking ethereal X Factor, only top people can do this in wrestling, but we don't quite know why Becky Lynch and John Cena and Roman Reigns can do this and other people can't. I think it's just being able to control the emotions of a crowd.
Yeah, and not even just control them, but, like, be aware of them and be fluid with them. Like, it would have been very different if John had gone into that match and gone, well, I'm the good guy, so I've got to act like the good guy, even though these fans hate my guts.
Yeah.
And they've got signs saying, if Cena wins, we riot. Like, he obviously could pick up on that and was like, right, I need to wrestle a slightly different style. I have to portray a slightly different character. You know, a version of myself that isn't just the baby face.
I think Rob as well, it's to his credit that he leans in just enough into that crowd. That crowd who, you know, this is the same, even though they're kind of doing a parody almost of what the original ECW was, that crowd still was ready, willing to go to chant anything under the sun, to spoil the match if necessary by chanting, if they fucked up or anything like that. And I felt Rob, it was the most understated thing of the whole match, is that he leans into it just enough.
Oh, yeah.
Little wink and a nod, but it's still Rob's match. It's not like the crowd's dictating what Rob is going to do. It almost feels like Rob and John together have this crowd in the palms of their collective hands.
Definitely.
And like, even when he wins the championship, Rob's still like, well, plans change, things can happen. It's almost depressing. And I keep this in mind that when we watched this other documentary, the one from 2019, where Rob was struggling with a lot of concussions and going through a very dark period in his life. That period where it was filmed, I think it was back in 2016 originally. But Rob saying, lower my expectations. If you have your expectations lowered, it means that you can't be disappointed. But when he starts saying that to the point where it's like, I don't look forward to things, or I don't kind of get excited about things because I know that, he said like the rug has been pulled out for me so many times in my life that I've just stopped, I've given up on kind of the idea of expectations. And that for me kind of was maybe a glimpse behind the jovial mask into something a little bit darker. And that's maybe something that is harder for Rob to reconcile with his kind of cool attitude or whatever, is that, when you have been disappointed, and you can argue whose fault it is hard to get your expectations up, and if he's been made the world champion, and also as well, your ECW champion as well, he's a dual world champion, he's like, I don't know, man, easy come, easy go. It feels like Rob was never able to, and this is by his own admission, to actually accept that they were now taking him seriously.
But maybe it was a good thing, though, that he was like that, given what happened shortly after this.
Were you surprised by the incident? The incident in Ohio?
I mean, I was and I wasn't. I'm not surprised that something like this happened, because I think that's unfortunately the risk. And if you're... Yeah, okay, so I guess we've got to say what happened. Rob Van Dam and Sabu got arrested for speeding, and I believe they were also arrested for driving under the influence.
Yeah, there was they included the dash cam footage of the cop pulling them over. Ooh. Which was some it started off as being like kind of a little bit wire and intense, like, you driving around, what do you smell drugs in the car, sir? And then it quickly devolved into like Trailer Park Boys nonsense, where it's like, do you often drive around without a top on, sir? and Sabu's like, we're on TV. Tell them we're on TV. We're on TV. And like, oh, you're on TV? Are you wrestler? Yeah, I'm RVD. Oh yeah, I know you. Step out of the car, please, sir. Like the vague attempt to be like, I am both the WWE and ECW champion. Yeah. I remember there was just this overwhelming sense at the time of just like, people weren't angry at Rob, they weren't angry at WWE, they were just miserable, just depressed by the whole thing. Like, because it's like, oh. Well,
it's sad because like, I expect better of him, to be honest. Like, don't fucking drive under the influence. Like, whatever, take drugs.
Don't drive with Sabu.
I'm never gonna judge people for like smoking marijuana or whatever. Like,
When we talk about in wrestling, it's probably like on the list of things. It's probably one of the more beneficial things that wrestlers could be having in their lives. But
as we were saying, like, don't drive under the influence. Just don't do it. Don't do it. It's illegal. It's really dangerous and really fucking stupid. So I don't really have much empathy for him, because like that was a decision he made and he shouldn't have done it.
Like, there's no way where WWE are going to come out and be like, no, as a matter of fact, we're going to stand beside Rob in this instance. He's the WWE and ECW champion. There's like, Vince actually is asked in the doc, and he's like, well, it made the company look like shit, so I had to take the belt off him.
Part of me does wonder, though, given what you were saying about how Rob Van Dam seems depressed around the time he got given these titles, and how he did feel like something was coming, how much of it was like self-inflicted. Almost like he did it on purpose. Like he thought he didn't deserve these opportunities he was being given, and so did everything he could to like undo it all.
I mean, we had the prevailing theory at the time in 2006, and keep in mind as well, like, we're talking about attitudes to drugs vis-a-vis 2021, where we've got record levels of legalization and probably the most the least criminally minded viewpoint towards it in America. Like, back in 2006, that was not the fucking case at all,
Yeah.
you know? So this was, like, as if he had been pulled over with, like, if he'd been pulled over with crack or something like that,
Yeah.
it probably would have played out the same way at the time, you know, because there wasn't much of a distinction. You're with an illegal drug, you're a bad man, you're going down for this, how dare you shame the company. But this theory that we all had as fans at the time who were desperate for this ECW relaunch to be great was that this is what killed the ECW relaunch. And it would have been great and it would have worked really well, except Rob Van Dam and Sabu got pulled over, and that meant that they had to scupper all the great plans that they had, and all of a sudden it became this really crappy show, and then by December everything is gone. Now, you and I have watched ECW's December to Dismember 2006.
Yes, unfortunately we have.
It's the only wrestling match we've ever had to put on the Persona 5 soundtrack to make our way through at the end of it, that main event. The idea that this somehow ruined that great idea that Vince had.
But and it's not just, I don't think it's just the fans where this idea came from. Vince himself in this documentary was implying that was why that happened. He was directly saying, if Rob hadn't, made that stupid mistake, then maybe ECW would have had a more successful.
What an easy out for you.
Yeah, fucking in hell. Easy to blame other people, isn't it?
I'm just saying, like, when we had an ECW with heavy hitters like The Big Show and Bob Holly on it, it just didn't feel like it was destined for great things, irregardless of, I think someone on that roster that had Sandman, Balls Mahoney, Axel Rotten, Rob Van Dam, Sabu. I mean, I could go on. It's a fucking it was a who's who of people they hired who had a litany of problems in the past. And
yeah,
a lot of them got cleaned up and all that, but it wasn't a ticking time bomb. But like, something was going to fucking happen eventually.
Yeah,
and I don't think Vince set it up for it to fail like people reckon it was, but just. There's enough shit that went on as a result of this with Rob, and you could tell he's fucking very humiliated talking about it.
He's mortified.
It ain't cool to talk about it.
No.
But hey, this takes us to our third match, which is these guys' first match together after being pulled over together in a slightly altered new version of ECW on Sci-Fi from the 15th of August 2006. It's Sabu and Rob Van Dam in a ladder match. I thought it would be very strange for us to do an episode on Rob Van Dam and not show you these two buddies going at it. These guys have wrestled a bajillion times over the years.
So is this after he's been stripped of his 2 titles?
Yes, this is Rob coming back now with the wind somewhat taken out of his sails.
So this match is it's a ladder match for the contract to wrestle the current ECW World Champion, The Big Show.
Get that grin off your face.
Just can't say it with a straight face.
He's the Extreme Giant, Joe. Stop it now. Do you want to step foot in an Extreme Elimination Chamber with him?
Now, I wonder how much of this whole Vince destroyed ECW from the inside thing is like intentional, and how much of it is Vince seeing, rightly so, that, as you say, a lot of the ECW top guys had problems, and instead putting his eggs in a more reliable basket, such as the Big Show, a company guy.
Yeah, I don't think Big Show's going to get pulled over somehow.
No.
I strongly doubt. I mean, he's got a bus. Good luck trying to pull that shit over.
I imagine Big Show has had one toke of a weed once in his life and was like, that was a good time, and then never again has touched anything.
I love like Sabu and Rob Van Dam. Their relationship is like, so they almost feel like they're twins or something. Like they have their own
like
language.
Brothers, yeah,
they have this like close connection. And the special thing about that, and why I love showing you this match, is it feels like both these guys, I don't think they've ever sat down and go, right, in this match you're going to do this, this, and this. It feels like they could both go and go, you know what, we'll just do whatever.
Yeah.
And it works like 50-60% of the time?
Yeah.
Maybe? There's some hits in this, and there are definitely some misses, let's just say. You can tell as well that Rob Van Dam is in the bad books, because when they do his in-ring introduction, where it's Rob Van, and he does a cool spin kick for Dam, they cut away to the audience.
Oh, I don't like that.
Someone's in trouble. Yeah, I don't know if the men's focus is 100% here or not, because Rob goes for the pinfall quite early on in this ladder match, where the referee's like, hey, come on, Rob, get up off him, you gotta climb a ladder, 1, 2, 3. And Rob gets in his face like, shut up, man, if I want to pin him in a ladder match, oh, damn it. Early on, Rob does this big, crazy dive, and I think it's the stupidest smart thing, or the smartest stupid thing I've ever seen in wrestling, because he just goes, blah! and you were like, what the fuck is going on? What did Rob try and do there?
Bad camera angle.
Really bad camera angle. What was it he was actually trying to do?
He was just trying to jump for the contract, which is really cool. And it's something that bothers me in wrestling matches, with like ladder matches specifically, is that they never just try and jump for it. And like, considering he is a jumper,
he could probably make it if he wanted to, yeah.
I want to see that. I'm glad they included it, and I'm really disappointed they didn't include the angle where you could actually see how close he got to grabbing it for real.
Rob dived so Orange Cassidy could reach.
Yes.
There are some really ropey bits involving Sabu in this bad boy.
There's a moment where there's a massive fuck up on the edge of the ladder where Sabu, he tries to do like a flip where he like lands on the edge of the ladder.
Where he's going to jump off the ladder as like a platform almost.
No, this is a different one.
Yes.
When he's like, the ladder is on its side and he does like a flip where he's then going to, I think he's trying to land on the edge of the ladder, but obviously that's impossible to fucking do. Like, and he falls off and falls out, and it's just...
There are times when Sabu and Rob Van Dam do things together that they'll only do it when they're wrestling each other. And it feels like this kind of childish one-upsmanship almost, where it's like, yeah, check out this thing that I'm going to do. And like, you would obviously not try and do that normally. Like, there are things that specifically Sabu does to Rob in this match where you kind of think, how could you have thought that would do anything other than you slip over and fall on your bum?
Yeah.
Like, you can't even see... Like, he's not a squirrel, let's just say. There's no trajectory that has been linked in there straight away.
No, he's like a very clumsy dog. No, that's not fair, because he is really good.
Yeah, that's it, because he'll do 2 fuck-ups, and that's it, these guys, they fuck up a whole bunch, and then they pull out something spectacular, and you're like, oh,
and I'm sure if you saw him successfully pull off the move that he botches, it would be like a thing of absolute sheer wonder and beauty.
Yes.
But it's high risk, high reward.
Oh, God, there's a part where Sabu does a move called the Arabian Face Crusher, where he kind of jumps on him with the chair underneath his arse.
Oh, God.
And he smacks Rob on the ladder, and then Rob kind of contorts himself in the ladder on his neck, and he's like he's been electrocuted.
It's horrible.
Absolutely. And this is the thing as well to bear in mind, like, even Rob, when he's kind of like, I don't say he's phoning it in here, but the wind has been taken out of his sails, it has been confiscated, and he's still doing things that, like, I wouldn't think most wrestlers in the roster could even hope to attempt to do.
No.
I mean, if someone tried to do that, they'd probably just hurt their neck.
And I wonder, you know how he was saying about, everyone was trying to change me, which I think we both agree was kind of a bit strange for him to say, given that it seems like he's being his authentic self through most of his career. Do you think, because I know it's a big thing at the moment where really talented, especially aerial style wrestlers will get told by the Federation, the WWE, don't wrestle that style. Don't be so flippy-do because we don't want you to look that good. We want this guy to look good instead.
Yeah.
Do you think he would have been told by the people backstage, don't do all that amazing aerial maneuvers because it makes us other guys look bad?
I think he's a unique case because, you know, as we said, I reckon that writing room was quite... And actually, they speak to Brian Gerwitz, one of the head writers in the documentary, which they almost never do speak to writers for WWE docs. And he was like, yeah, we were kind of split because half of them thought he should do this and the other half he should do that. I think how it probably came down to, and the reason why Rob's in-ring style was never edited in that same way, is that there are people who were probably saying Rob should be a main event top guy, and those people would be the likes of Heyman, and they would say, well, the reason he should be a top guy is because of his spectacular offense. And then maybe the detractors, the Triple H's of the world, would be like, nah, he's not a top guy, but, you know, he should do that flippy shit because it's good for the middle of the card, you know, warm them up before I go in and have a 45-minute match with Kane.
When I do my arm wrestling match.
When I spit the water, it'd be so fucking cool if Rob could do some flips earlier on in the night.
Water shit.
So I think that you kidding me? Water shit. Water shit? We could have had that.
Water shit.
Triple H in the dark over there. But, like, I think that's it. Rob kind of slipped through the cracks of, like, I think it worked out to his benefit that the people who reckon that all he's good for is that flippy shit. Yeah, go ahead, do that, go on. And the people are like, Rob Van Dam is the most extreme athlete in the WWE. Will be like, do the flippy shit, Rob. That's how you'll get over. So yeah, like, Rob, like, the only thing that he did less of, I think, was the stuff with the weapons. Like, you know, the Van Terminator, because that was Shane McMahon's coast to coast at that point, and the Van Daminator. And a lot of the stuff like, you know, throwing the chairs and all that jazz as well.
The wham bam thank you maminator.
Here's the thing, right? You mock it. But the Van Terminator, and this is how much Paul Heyman has a hard on for Rob Van Dam. Paul Heyman, he booked an entire pay-per-view and promoted and marketed it around the idea that you would see the Van Terminator for the first time ever. And he would do like, this Sunday on pay-per-view, the most extreme move you've ever seen. Rob Van Dam has been practicing all week, and he's going to do it, he's going to unveil it. And it's not going to be, oh, you're going to see this match, or this title's going to be defended, or you're going to see these wrestlers. No, you'll see Rob's cool new move.
Wow.
Which, in fairness, given that it's one of the most, WWE wants to pop a crowd, they'll have Shane McMahon go out and do the coast to coast.
Yeah.
The fucking 25 years after the fact,
WWE does not want you to know how much better Rob Van Dam is at doing that move.
Effortlessly. So I think, Rob did less of his hardcore stuff, but still did a lot of his flip-de-doo stuff. But speaking of hardcore and flip-de-doo stuff, this bit was great. He did a flip into a ladder, and then he flipped the damn ladder.
Oh, God.
It was the most dangerous thing ever.
So scary. I thought that was a botch.
What?
Yeah.
He fucking whopped himself,
Yeah.
and then he got Sabu right in the back of the head
Yeah.
as well. Oh
I don't
my
know how
God.
he did that.
There's a 5-star frog splash to Sabu, and then the Extreme Giant Big Show runs in and demands the contract is lowered. Sabu, and honestly, one thing I loved about this is a really unique end to the match. Sabu's on top of the Big Show, and he just grabs the contract out of the air, and after getting beaten up, he eats the contract. Sabu picks up the win. Rob Van Dam remains in the doghouse.
Yeah, I don't know why Big Show had to, beat up Rob Van Dam afterwards, after Sabu had won.
I mean, it was just Rob being kind of, taken off the top
Yeah.
guy's shelf and put right back into where you were.
Bring him down a peg or 3.
I mean, that's got to be dispiriting, because, he knows why this has happened to him.
That's the business.
But, that's it. He's going to basically realise now that it's all out of his control, and the fact that he still, was putting on matches, I think, is impressive.
Yeah, it's still putting on a good show. It's not like so many wrestlers in that position would just check out. They'd be like, you know what, fuck it, I'm phoning it in. No one gives a shit about me. I don't give a shit about them.
I'm sorry, it's really, because it's a total false equivalence, but just imagine if Sasha Banks got pulled over and got the title stripped off her, and then coming back, and they're like, you're going to be mid-card now. And
I feel like she'd just put in a mannequin and dress it up as her and be like, yeah, fuck it.
She can fucking do it.
She
Fuck
can do
this.
it. I'm not doing it.
But did Rob seem in any way different to you in this match? Did he seem like he was, I'm the dog who formerly had his day, or was he still Mr. Tuesday Night?
He was still very impressive, but for me, this is, bear in mind, I didn't know this stuff with him and Sabu, the speeding and the DUI. I didn't know this had happened before this match. I thought this was him being modified by the backstage fellas being like, don't do all your amazing aerial acrobatic stuff. We want to tone it down a little bit, rather than them just literally just trying to bury him, I guess, a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's ECWs are written on the mat. They're wrestling a ladder match, and there's chairs and there's stuff involved.
Yes, they're not burying him that much.
But it doesn't really. I mean, for me, it didn't really feel that ECW.
No,
this
yeah,
one. That was
not
long
at all.
before the Big Show showed up.
Yeah, and even in terms of as far as ladder matches go, this is a fair bit after Jeff Hardy would have had his spectacular ladder matches and stuff.
Oh yeah.
So
Definitely.
in the grand scheme of things, I'm guessing this is quite low key.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is them trying to, let's try do a ladder match slightly differently. And I think the one idea they probably had in it was, let's not use the ladder to actually finish the match.
Which I like that. I mean, yeah, use the giant. Makes sense.
How'd you get on with this one? What was your star rating for RVD and Sabu?
It was a good match, but the ending was weird. I didn't like that Big Show came in and then I liked the ending with Sabu grabbing the contract off Big Show's shoulders. That was cool, but I didn't like Big Show coming in anyway. That made no sense to me. I never like it when it's a match to decide who gets to compete against the title holder, and then the title holder comes in to interfere.
Yeah, what's their game? Big Show was
Why
calling
are
for the
you
contract to be lowered
Yeah,
down.
why?
What are you going to do?
Go home,
Maybe
Big Show.
he knew what Sabu knew, which is the contract was delicious, and he wanted to get a bite of it before Sabu did.
I gave this match 3.5 stars, which at the time I was like, oh, I think that's a bit harsh of me, but actually in hindsight, I think I was being quite kind.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think I'm going to have to say as well that, if you were to line up all of my match ratings across the whole board of every match I've ever reviewed for this podcast,
I'm sure someone has.
I'm sure No one has. I think it would seem very inconsistent, but that's because each episode I'm judging it based on the wrestler themselves.
And your expectations
Yeah,
of them,
not some kind of Dave Meltzer arbitrary objective, this is how things are and this is how they will be.
Look, whatever you need to do to explain your honky tonk man Dusty Rhodes rating is fine,
It's
Joe.
a case-by-case basis, and if you don't agree with me, you just don't understand.
Exactly. That's
Educate
it.
yourself.
It's entirely context-based.
Exactly.
That's all we're saying here. So yeah, poor Rob, who is now going on having lost 2 world championships in 2 consecutive nights. He pretty much says that the whole situation that went down with the DUI and being pulled over, he said the worst thing about it was that it confirmed his reputation to the naysayers that he was just a stoner and a burnout and that he shouldn't be trusted. And also he says he felt really hurt Sabu because Sabu had been trying to maybe prove that he wasn't just this guy. And look, fucking hell, Sabu smoking weed, Jesus Christ, there's hardly a surprise. You know, I don't know what that's confirming other than...
Don't fucking drive then. Don't drive. Don't drive. You are proving everyone right. Don't do it.
Their explanation is going to be, he was smoking, I was driving.
Don't care.
You know?
Don't do it.
But like you're in a car with the windows rolled up, lads.
It smells like weed. The policeman could tell.
Well, you got your top off because you're having a real sober time, Rob. Is that it? Like, come on, for fuck's sake. Here's a real miserable thing that happens. It's 2007, and like Rob pretty much spends the rest of his contract. You could tell just looked a bit. The matches were still great. He could still play out the performance. He could still do all the Rob Van Dam stuff. But he could tell that his energy or his vibration or whatever Rob would like to call it, it wasn't there. He wasn't a happy camper. He is being told now that, look, your contract's coming up. Will you please re-sign? He says, no, I don't want to re-sign. They're like, okay, we'll let you go, but you have to commit to re-signing or coming back at some point, and he wouldn't do that either.
Wow.
So they decide that they'll write him off, and the easiest way to write people off in 2007 was to have Randy Orton kick you in the head. You know, because that was Randy's
it's like
gimmick.
A horse.
Yeah, put him down.
Sorry, horse kicked him in the head.
And
he can't go to war.
This is the thing which was so fucking shit. He is really pissed off because they want to write him off, saying Randy kicks him in the head, you know, gives him a concussion, so he's written off in storyline. Rob was like really hurt by this because he's like, I wanted to be known that even though I was a laid-back guy, that I never wanted people to think that I wasn't a tough guy.
Yeah, to be fair, I think if you come from ECW, you're very well aware of what that says about you, even if it's not true.
Yeah, and he worked through a lot of concussions. The estimate he had in the documentary that we had was hundreds.
Yeah, there's a moment where he goes to the hospital and like there's a doctor there who's like asking him about his history of concussions. Like, have you ever had a concussion before? He goes, yes. She goes, how many? He goes, a couple of hundred. And she laughs. And goes,
yeah, seriously.
So how many though? Yeah, and he's like, oh no, yeah, a couple of hundred. And so obviously like she thinks that he's just taking the piss.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, he really would have had hundreds.
And the fucking scary thing about it is that this supposed fake kick he takes to the head to give him a write-off from the storyline, it actually gave him a concussion.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
So he actually got concussed doing that. And I think...
What waste! What waste!
I know. And I just think it's something that was kind of slipping by at the time because, you know, he came up where it's like you don't report the concussions because it's ECW and you don't want people to take your spot, you don't want people to not think that you're tough and all that.
Just makes him look like he's getting old or weak or something.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, the cumulative damage of that. Like, thank God, you know, he had a brain scan and you find out in that documentary, you know, that he has got just pretty much the standard brain of someone in their late 50s. You know,
which is like considered good news for him. Yeah. He's so happy with that.
Well, Chris Benoit, when he passed away, he had the brain of an 83-year-old, you know, with severe degenerative, you know, brain disease. So I think, you know, the effects that it can have on the brain can't be understated. And I just think, yeah, it was not a nice way for him to leave WWE. And he did take a bit of time off and all that, and he was away for a while. But he refers to himself as his spirit being weak at the time. And
sounds like Carmela Soprano. My boy Robbie, his spirit is weak.
The difference between me and you, Rob, is that you're going to fucking hell when you die.
Father, please help my friend Rob with his weak spirit. And
I think it's noticeable when someone's kind of passion is gone.
Yeah.
Because he did show up in TNA in 2010, so it was like nearly 2 or 3 years after he's went away. You know, he did some independent bits here or there. He said he deliberately set his price really high because he only wanted to wrestle infrequently. He was no longer wrestling in his mind for the love of wrestling, which, Jesus Christ, sacrilege of sacrileges. How dare you, not want to wrestle for the love of the business and all that. And I thought, I was really impressed that he said, you know what, I went to TNA and I went there for one reason. It's because they gave me really good money.
Good for him. He really knows his worth.
That's all he cared about at that point. He says it was strictly business for him. That's all it was. He went there. They made him a world champ. He says, great, I was happy to be world champion because it meant I got paid more money. And he knew that there was big money there because that's when Hogan and Bischoff had been brought into TNA. But his debut night on TNA, I'll never forget it. It shows you how silly it was, TNA, and how backwards his position in that company was, and why you probably shouldn't care if you're in a position like him. His debut match, when he first came out, is a big surprise. At the same time, they also debuted Sting being a bad guy. So Rob Van Dam's debut in TNA was him being beaten up with a baseball bat for 10 minutes by Sting. And Rob likes to sell, Joe, and Sting is just wailing on him with a bat. And I remember me and my friends, we waited 3 years. And we should have taken a cue from Rob Van Dam and not take it so fucking seriously.
Oh dear.
He says at one point, he's like, they had me as one of the top guys, and I told them my contract, I'm due some time off. So they had this thing where Abyss, he beat me up with a board covered in nails, and they covered me head to toe in blood like I had been in a fucking horror movie.
Jeez, now.
I went on holiday for a month, and I just came back, no explanation. I was like, okay, he genuinely didn't care. He said when he came back for WWE in 2013, because he had some, Royal Rumble appearances. He came back for around a year thereabouts, and he said that was good for his soul because he got to meet some of the younger wrestlers, pass on some of the knowledge, got to wrestle some people he hadn't wrestled before. But he said his run in 2014, he said it almost made him never want to wrestle ever again.
Wow.
Now, that's scary to think, and it probably shows you that full-time wrestling's not the best thing for Rob Van Dam. If he could be there 1 year and go, this is great, and then it's just one little bit too long, and all of a sudden he was it killed his entire passion. He said, everyone in that locker room was more excited to be there than me. And everyone in the locker room was more excited that I was there than me.
Wow, that sounds like he's depressed again.
That is telltale depression, for sure.
Yeah.
2016 is probably one of the roughest years of his life because he describes it as being the year where he went from being a child to being grown up. He was close with his father. His father passed away. All throughout his time in WWE and all throughout his time afterwards, he was the guy I always knew as you'd read the articles about real love stories in wrestling, like Mick Foley and his wife, and there's lots of examples.
I can't think of any that haven't gotten divorced.
But the one that would always bring up was Rob Van Dam and his wife Sonia.
Yeah.
So close, she'd be ringside for his matches.
He went home for Christmas. He didn't even have kids.
Exactly.
What other wrestler did that?
He was, and he said that the thing that was most important to him in his life was that he was loyal, and he thought that was one of his defining characteristics, that he was loyal to her even when he was on the road. He was gone so often that his loyalty to her was important. He realized then later that loyalty was kind of there in place of actual love, and him telling himself that he was loyal and he was good was more important than the fact that he didn't seem to actually get on with her anymore. But she had bowel cancer around 2007, 2008. And that's in terms of the cancers that you can get, it's one of the most severe
really
things.
It
doesn't affect women as much. So when you get it, and she got it only in her 30s, it's really severe.
Really scary, yeah.
And he was by her bedside the whole time, and he helped her through it and all that. But yeah, he found out later on that she was cheating on him. And this is now, bear in mind, this is on Rob's side of the story. I've not heard anything from her, and there's almost nothing on the internet written about this. It's only stuff that's been said in interviews. But he said that he found out that she was, cheating on him with everyone. He said, the pool boy, the guy who came to, look after her car, was she would cheat on me with everyone.
It's surprising, though, because, one of the things I know about bowel cancer is it really knocks you out. You can't just go around and have fun. It's horrible.
I didn't know if it was a before or an after, but he was I mean, in 2016, he said it was the first time he started drinking heavily.
Wow.
Or actually, and for someone who was such an advocate of marijuana, I mean, one of the greatest arguments I often hear about marijuana is that, well, if you could have that instead of drinking as much, it's,
technically it's
technically
better for
you.
you. Yeah.
It's less calories at least, you know. and you know, to hear him drinking heavily and he's probably smoking heavily as well. He probably, I mean, that documentary that we watched, he's fucking wiped out, Joe.
Yeah, he is.
He is so miserable. Watching a lad go on an 8-date stand-up comedy tour when he's had a divorce, his dad died, and then he says, the most important thing I realized in my life at that time was my dog.
This is really cute little dog.
And then he's like,
cute little baby dog.
what's going to happen if my dog dies? And then he's depressed because he's like, if my dog dies, I'm fucked. And then his dog dies.
No.
And in the divorce settlement, his wife gets a lot, let's just say. Rob lost the big house. He lost a lot of his nest egg and all that. And he also lost the ashes to the dog. She got the ashes to the dog in the divorce. Which sounds like...
Couldn't you just split them?
Yeah.
It's ashes. It's not like it's a quantifiable one thing.
Spread them or something. Or like...
Why do you have to hoard a dog's ashes?
And it just kind of... I want to bring all this up because for someone who's known as being happy-go-lucky for all of his life, and then he goes through a year like that, is it any surprise that Katie Forbes and Rob's best life that he's been living since then, since 2017, 2018? I mean, I'm quite happy for him.
Oh, yeah.
Because in both the documentaries that we watched, when Katie Forbes shows up, Rob Van Dam...
He, like, ages backwards.
he just can't stop looking and smiling at her all the fucking time.
Yeah, he's smitten.
And they are very much perfect for each other.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They love talking about energy and vibrations. And the only thing Rob really cares about these days, it seems, is that if Katie Forbes, she's trying to get into wrestling and try and, like, you know, build up some experience, he just wants to, you know, he was in Impact recently, and it was because she could get to be in Impact, and he wanted her to get some experience wrestling for a company and all that.
Bless him.
And, like, if he
supporter of women's wrestling.
That supporter of Katie Forbes wrestling, and whoever might enter into their arrangement that they have. Rob, in his recent run in TNA, got Impact Wrestling banned from Twitch TV because of his live sex celebration with Katie Forbes and a younger woman as well. So
they weren't even born yet.
Rob Van Dam bragging that the women he's having sex with, they don't know what ECW is.
Yeah.
They're like, what's ECW, Rob? It's like, they weren't even born, man. Like him showing up like in the middle of other people's promos to make out with and grope, like shoot grope with Katie Forbes.
I don't know why as well, like so often when this stuff happens I'm like, ugh, disgusting, what a dirty old pervert, but with him I'm just like, yeah, fucking go for it, man, live your best life, I'm so happy for you.
But like, yeah, they just like they live stream together, they just like, he's like, they have there's all these clips of them from TNA where it's just literally her like, look, this is my new stuff from my OnlyFans. He's like, this is fucking awesome.
Subs, tips, $3,000. No, it doesn't go that high.
And like, he, you know, they're quite upfront in the doc where they're like, look, you know, a lot of people when they come to see Rob now, they're like, oh, it's like Rob and Katie. I kind of wish it was just Rob in the way it was. But it's like, he says the only thing that has me remotely interested in wrestling is that Katie wants to be interested in wrestling.
Yeah.
That's all I give a shit about. So he's happy to wrestle infrequently. You know, he wrestles maybe once or twice a year. He's kind of slowed down a lot more in recent years. But I think if his probably dream job would be like manager who gets to make out with Katie Forbes if she showed up elsewhere.
They should fucking sign her at AEW. Get them both on.
I mean, I figured that, you know, AEW, which definitely has a lot of the more like kind of atypical. I mean, how would you describe Katie Forbes for folks who don't know her?
Oh, she's very beautiful, obviously. She looks very enhanced. She's had a lot of augmentations, we'll say.
She likes to say that her butt and her boobs aren't fake, they're predetermined.
Amazing. Fucking legend.
So you can tell she gets it, like.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, she's got a look for sure. She looks a bit like a porn star, and I mean that's a total compliment.
But that's what you don't see people like. You know, people always kind of go, "Oh yeah, Katie, she's plastic. They probably want her in WWE." It's like, well,
no
actually,
way.
She's a little bit probably X-rated for WWE.
Yeah,
but
no, and I think that wouldn't work at all for WWE.
Seeing as 90% of what she does seems to involve like I saw a clip which is Rob Van Dam beating up Sami Callihan as Katie Forbes just twerks in the background, like with a big go, yay! And I mean, like, she comes out, like, she shoots money into the air and stuff like, yeah, but the two of them, they seem very, very happy with each other at the moment. And I think probably the most important thing for Rob going into the Hall of Fame was that he got to pass around his papers and he got to hang out with Katie Forbes.
RVDCBD.
I mean, I'm glad for him, for someone who's probably been the lad who's chatted at the party his entire life, talking, about the great medical benefits of this, that, or the other. And now he's vindicated.
Yeah.
He's on a WWE documentary talking about his dispensary, talking about his range of CBD peach rings that you can buy, his rolling papers. He's fucking handing Vince McMahon skins at the Hall of Fame.
Oh, I think this will probably go some way to make him one of the highest earners from the WWE, like, in terms of non-wrestling earnings, just because, like, it's perfect for him. It's perfect for him. It's such a profitable industry right now. It's like we were saying, like Sandman going into real estate ownership. Like, it's sensible to put your eggs in different baskets. And, like, obviously this is something he really, really is passionate about.
Where else have you seen a wrestler like this where they're like, you know what? I'm just kind of like, I'm not done forever, but I'm like, I'm past it. And he'd been past it for quite a while. It felt like he was just kind of, not past in terms that he hasn't got it anymore, he can't do it.
He's just done with it.
He's just done with it. He's emotionally moved on, I think.
Yeah.
He has gotten over the drug of professional wrestling.
Yeah.
I don't think he's no longer addicted to the pop of a crowd or anything like that.
Oh, I don't know. I think he's still addicted to the pop of a crowd, but not the wrestling necessarily.
Stand-up, I guess, is where he's kind of doing all that stuff now.
I think for a lot of people, wrestling is the only experience they've had of getting that type of adrenaline from an audience. But Rob, I think he's a funny guy. He's very well spoken. Yeah. He's educated and he's very charismatic. Like, I'm sure, as you say, he's doing stand-up now. He can get that type of adrenaline rush from an audience from other avenues.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like if I saw Rob Van Dam was doing stand-up, I'd probably want to go and see it. Not necessarily because, I thought it was quite telling that we watched an entire documentary about him doing stand-up, and granted, it was probably under the worst circumstances possible, which is, under concussions and all that. Yeah. But, like, the amount of times you're shown clips of Rob Van Dam doing stand-up across all this media, and they will never show you him doing his jokes.
Yeah.
Which is kind of strange. But, like, you were saying that you feel like more wrestlers should be getting into not necessarily stand-up, just like an evening with a Q&A
exactly.
or whatever.
William Regal, it's something we've talked about many, many times. William Regal occasionally does these, like, an evening with William Regal, and he'll do a Q&A, and he'll just tell stories about his life on the road, his life as a wrestler, his life not as a wrestler, his life, having retired. And it's just really interesting. And honestly, it's what fans want. They want to hear these stories. They want to get a chance to meet with the guy afterwards and take some photos. And that's it. Like, I think stand-up is a very natural next step for wrestlers because it's an element of performing and an element of risk.
Yeah.
But I think really, I can't think of any wrestler that's transitioned into stand-up because they are that good at stand-up.
No, Foley really, he tried hard, and I think he said he had to come to the conclusion that people just...
It's not him.
That's not what they're here for, They might think they're coming to see you tell jokes, but they're here to hear you talk about your career and all that.
I think it would be a lot bigger effect as well if you did this kind of like thing like William Regal, where you do this like Q&A type, an evening with, and then you happen to have some absolutely banging jokes that really pop the crowd, rather than, hey everyone, you're here to hear me be a professional funny man.
But he had some cracking stories about life on the road. Yeah, I think like Rob will always find a place for himself in wrestling should he want it.
Yes.
I think it's safe to say he's probably not sitting on the mountain of earnings and notoriety, and I don't think he has the level of comfort that you would have assumed that he had, seeing as he's probably one of the most well-known wrestlers from the 2000s.
But I think as a result of that, he has a very reliable, consistent cult status.
And I think he's a bit more humble than you would assume, given that his character was Mr. Braggadocious, Mr. Egotistical. He's surprisingly down to earth.
He is and he isn't. He still obviously thinks... It's funny, because like my main takeaway from watching these two documentaries was that if there was a Venn diagram between Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels, Rob Van Dam would be the intersection, where he like takes himself seriously, but also doesn't.
He takes the fact that he doesn't take himself seriously very seriously. Yeah,
yes.
I think you're right. That's the kind of enigma that is Rob Van Dam. They went out of their way every time Rob can tell you that he's one of a kind, like his theme song was, But it is. I struggle to think of anyone who's like him now. And all this actually really did, all this research about Rob Van Dam, it certainly helped me gain appreciation for him. I hope you have as well. But it's really just made me think, like, they're spinning their wheels trying to make Matt Riddle be something that he's not, which is...
Yeah.
It feels like they've got buyer's remorse from 20 years ago. Like, damn it, we should have done that weed stuff with Rob Van Dam back then. and Rob was always trying to get his stuff in, wherever he could. Do you remember the story about Rob and Rey Mysterio when they were a tag team and their finisher was the 420 leg drop?
No.
Well, it's easy because they went to Vince and they said, well, it's easy, Vince, because there's 4 of us. We got 4 legs, right? I'm size 12, Ray's size 8. 420 leg drop. Excellent,
Makes perfect sense. Exactly.
Watch now all the 420 jokes between Randy Orton and Matt Riddle over the next couple of years. Good Lord. Well, that's going to do it for looking through the career and the life and times of Rob Van Dam. He's probably off in a hot tub somewhere at the moment, but for now, let's look at your tweets and your Facebook posts. And we're back. Oh, Joe, it's been a fun time talking about Rob Van Dam, and to paraphrase the incredibly tense confrontation between Rob Van Dam and Triple H. Yeah, he changed the style of the business. Yeah.
Unclench that fist, Triple H.
What? He became Steve Austin. He was so tense.
I didn't even know that that he didn't like him, but just seeing that clip out of context, I was like, wow, Triple H hates this guy.
Yeah, I thought I'd spend all this time like trying to look. Here's the reasons, the political reasons, the stuff with doing this angle with Stephanie that he nixed, and the kind of the back and the forth and all. No, you'll get it just there. Watch Triple H embrace, in inverted commas, embrace Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam, Vince McMahon, and Triple H in a room, and Triple H is so by far the coldest entity in that room.
Like this sulky little child.
I think, you know what? Anytime anyone rags on the Hall of Fame and think it's not worth it anymore, you think, the speeches aren't good, or like they cut it down, or they're just, doing a script. Moments like that is what it's worth for Joe, yeah?
Hell yes.
So we got some tweets in using the hashtag #HowToRVD. Don't forget, you can continue the conversation with the episode, as always, by using that old hashtag, giving us a follow on the old social media, on Twitter, @HowToWrestling. Joe, what have you got for us?
First up, over on Twitter, @HowToWrestling, we've got one here from Brutal Drummer. I didn't see him until the invasion angle, but he was a wrestler who could do your fake action figure moves in real life.
Oh, man. I mean, what for you in your mind is a fake action figure move, as someone who only in more later years came into contact with wrestling action figures?
Probably making like the action figure kind of do a quadruple flip and then fly around a bit.
Rolling, basically, like.
Pretty much, yeah.
Roly-poly figures, that's what it's all about.
They're not round enough to roll more. Next up, we have one from Rich E. Fave wrestler is a kid whose pothead gimmick went completely over my head. Whenever he said nobody gets higher than RVD, I thought he was referring to the air he got from the 5-star frog splash. I was a naive kid who thought he was just a cool Californian dude.
I mean, it completely went over my head as well. I think we talked about it as much like in the episode, but I think it's great that Rob made sure that he could jump higher than anyone, because otherwise they would have all been on him straight away.
Absolutely. No, you gotta have a reasonable life of Vince McMahon.
Exactly. You have to be able to jump very, very high and come up with incredibly good wordplay like the 420 leg drop. Otherwise, you'll be in jail.
Next, from Joe Del Toro, one of the extreme few who has a moveset all of his own. I can't think of any instances where someone has tried to do what he did regularly. Even when he did himself a standard move like a frog splash, he made it totally unique. The definition of a star in that regard.
I think there's great ground to be broken in a wrestler who's trying to be like a knockoff version of Rob Van Dam. Because I think we mentioned our Shinsuke episode, there's like kind of a gag Shinsuke Nakamura over in Japan who does kind of like, he's small and a crap version of Shinsuke. I think someone who like tried to do all of Rob Van Dam's moves.
Just do lots of roly-polies.
Joe, I think there's an opening for me to finally get my foot into the sport of professional wrestling. Because I roly-poly like a fucking king, yeah?
Now from Instant Critical. When RVD debuted on WWE, I was a casual teenage fan, gradually checking out. But Rob Van Dam's moveset, athleticism and confidence blew me away. I'd never seen anything like it in wrestling. Captivating, kept me watching for another year. I bet so many people were in that exact same boat. And Rob Van Dam kept fans along when I know there was a big change in everything in wrestling at the time.
No, I do remember like there was the kind of the core group of people who watched wrestling, and then there was these kind of like splinter groups once I kind of, everyone stopped watching in 2001 in my friendship group. And there would be like the guys in 2002, the cretin boys who would love like Brock Lesnar and stuff like that. But there was always a few kind of like, the alternative kids, the burnouts, the hippies, etc., who just had a love of wrestling vis-a-vis, like they couldn't explain a love of wrestling, but they could explain that they loved Rob Van Dam for whatever reason it was.
Next from I Like James T. RVD has always felt like a totally unique guy. His mix of kicks and high flying is something nobody else has ever replicated, and same goes for his crazy bumping skills. He was even a good promo too until he left ECW and became Mr. Cool Whatever Man for the rest of his career. What's your opinion on the Mr. Cool Whatever Man phase?
I mean, he rallied against it. Like we mentioned the ECW reunion show that he just did this kind of promo where he was angry and he just said like, "Oh, you just made me say cool whatever, dude." I think that was like a real point for fans to latch onto, because it was like, here's someone who has expressed his ultimate creative frustration, which is being pigeonholed as to be something that he feels he's not. And then I sat down and I watched a bunch of those, like, I was like, this will make Joe cringe. And you were like, this is great. Like, the stuff with him and Kane particularly was a highlight. And I think if you boil someone down to being like kind of a catchphrase or kind of a lowest common denominator like type of a character, like you make him like, Billy likes to talk about people being flanderized, where this become like a little catchphrase version of themselves. I mean, that does suck because you don't get to see their range. But I'm not going to be Mr. fucking Gloomy Gus and deny anyone the joy of a really funny, kind of crappy Rob Van Dam, cool, whatever, man. Like, we watched him in Austin, some of those bits.
Yeah.
Man, those guys, like, a guy going cool, whatever, man, when the other guy is a psychotic redneck, is fucking great.
It's so funny.
Throw Kurt Angle in there as well.
Yeah.
There's actually some comedy gold to be had with that style of a character.
I wish we had seen some, like, interactions with him and Vince. Because I think that would have been magical.
And I think ultimately what it is because Rob expressed frustration with that characterization, people were like, oh, that's why then he can't get over, because he's only allowed to say these few things. And the reality is you can see it in WWE all the time. I mean, we got Daniel Bryan who was pushed to the moon just by saying a 3-letter word over and over again.
Yeah.
It's more about the situations they're in, and the character can kind of, if it's a good enough performer, which Rob was, he could have been main eventing, being Mr. Cool Whatever Man. Yeah. And it would have worked. I stand by that.
No, I completely agree. Next up, from Matt Music Amura. I got to know him at the 2019 WrestleCon in New York. A friend of ours got to take a photo with him beforehand and told us that he noticed that he had a cut on his forearm. So when a friend of our group decided to get a photo as well, I decided to ask him about the cut. So he told us something like, "Bro, last night I was at a restaurant and the waiter came by me and told me that I was bleeding on my plate." And I was like, "Bro." I was like,
what a story.
Yeah, just bleeding on his plate. And I was like, "Bro, okay, I didn't notice. And I still don't know how I got it." And he told us this in such a cool whatever man way that I was like screaming internally.
That sounds like a good head over to our It's Raw podcast where we review Kitchen Nightmares. One time I was in a restaurant, this guy was just bleeding all over his plate, like,
the sauce. Last one then from Alex Mold 3. I'm pretty sure Rob Van Dam invented a weightlifting category where he weightlifts while holding a full split over 2 bars.
Wait, what? As in his legs split?
Yes. So I looked this up. This is completely true. Rob Van Dam invented a move called, or a weightlifting move called the Van Dam lift.
So I love this. Once again, we're adding into the How to Wrestling Hall of Lifting fame. We spent all this time in the Mark Henry episode talking about these amazing 1-inch curls, etc. And Van Dam is in the category. Next thing you're going to tell me he did it nude.
Oh God, this nude would...
Oh no.
No.
I just thought about that.
Wait till you see the video as well. Seriously, you do not want to see this nude. Very frightening. But basically, he does the splits, and we've seen him do the splits. Yeah. It's very impressive. He does it on 2 benches, which we've also seen. Mm-hmm. But from there, he lifts a 165-pound dumbbell off the floor, so that's a foot beneath him.
So reaching down,
and then lifts it up to his waist height and holds it there. And I will show you the video now, Kevin. And then I'm going to put it in the recommended bonus viewing so everyone else can see it as well. But only one person, it seems, has ever been able to beat his record. Because he invented this, no one else could do it. And then eventually one guy was like, yeah, I can do it. And he outdid the record.
What was it, the White Dragon like?
Pretty much the White Dragon. So, Kevin, I'm going to show you this.
Please.
And you can tell me what you think.
Sorry, that's a 2-handed waist that he has there.
So this dumbbell weighs 165 pounds, which is pretty much what I weigh.
That's you, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my fuck. That is insane.
Sorry, you have to see the end. And then he high-fives Bill Alphonse at the end.
Oh
like,
my
awesome.
God. I mean, if ever there was a point at which to end the story of Rob Van Dam, me, a lad who's been watching him for literally 20 years, my mind being blown by something that I thought that A, he would never have done, and B, no one could ever have done. Yeah, Mr. One of a Kind. That is some unique shit right there. Oh my God!
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
That is insane. How did his entire rib cage not just fall out of his body?
It's the groin that I don't understand, because like anyone who's even tried to do the splits, like even if you just sit on the ground with your legs apart and then lean forwards, you feel it in your groin. It like feels like your bottom half of your body's gonna fall out of itself. And like the way he bends, like he's more than splitting in half there. He's he's at an acute angle.
He turned himself into a V. It's insane. Oh my God. Well, thank you everyone for the incredible tweets and match recommendations, thoughts, etc. all about the wonderful Rob Van Dam. He's certainly a wrestler I felt confident at the start that you would like.
Yeah.
It feels like in the roundabout way of us kind of watching these different bits about him and finding out all these different little snippets of info strewn across all of wrestling history, it feels like you've liked him for different ways than I thought you would like him.
Oh, really?
I just thought you'd be like, yay, running and, he does flips. And he can do the splits. But his mindset, I think, is certainly something that is very unique, least of all his offensive maneuvers.
Genuinely, I know we were saying this only a moment ago, but like I think my favourite thing about him is like just his charisma. And I didn't expect that coming into this episode, that he would be such a good talker.
Yeah.
Like, I am not the biggest fan of him as a heel, but that's just personal preference. But like, I love the stuff that everyone else doesn't seem to like as much, the kind of corny, cool whatever man things that he does with the other characters there. It makes me think that he could have been an actor as if he wanted to.
Yeah.
Like he's just really gifted.
He has it. Whatever
Yes.
it is, he definitely has it. And he had it in spades. And I think it's safe to say no wrestling company ever really truly understood 100% what to do with him.
Yeah.
Because as great as ECW was for giving him a platform and all that, it feels like Rob needed to be pointed in a certain direction. I felt like he could have been perhaps the biggest name in wrestling of all time.
Yeah.
But no company either had the resources, the know-how, or just the ability to understand someone who was a little bit different from most other wrestlers.
Yeah.
Rob Van Dam is a fascinating person to look back at. And our next episode is going to be about someone who it certainly seems to be good sport and it being fascinating to look at, because he's had a whole shed load of documentaries about him. Last I checked, there's nearly 5 documentaries and counting about this gentleman.
We'd have to watch them all, do we?
No, but we're certainly going to have to go from one end of the spectrum to the other. Joe, this next episode is probably going to last longer than all the combined matches of our next topic, The Ultimate Warrior. Have you ever actively booed the announcement of a next episode before?
I don't think so. Not even Hulk Hogan.
What do you know about Ultimate Warrior so far?
He's a homophobe.
Yeah? Anything else?
He looks really scary. Like we watched a match of his where he's like kind of old and his body looked like it was trying to escape from itself.
Oh yes, we watched Good Friends, Better Enemies for Pay-Per-View Classic recently on the Patreon. He showed up there to wrestle inverted commas Goldust.
Ah, yes, and he wore the silly hat.
Yeah.
All the other various accessories.
So you just know him as a homophobe and a silly hat.
A homophobe and silly hat, yeah, pretty much.
There's a lot more, a lot worse, there's a lot more to him. Maybe enough time has passed from his genuinely untimely and very, very shocking passing. Let's try and chart our own course between the very, very, very polarizing opinions on the man and try and get to the meat of the matter. Who was the Ultimate Warrior? Why was he such a big presence in wrestling? Because he still seems to loom like a spectre over much of professional wrestling. He's someone who a lot of you will probably have grown up with and have very, very positive memories of. If you can, of course, separate the man from the wrestler, that's something we'll be talking about. We're going to be looking at matches. We're going to be looking at the very, very spicy career of the Ultimate Warrior. How to Warrior. We thought we'd go with the hashtag How To Warrior because that's what he legally changed his name to at one point.
Oh.
Warrior will be the next episode of How To Wrestling.
And that's warrior as in like a battle warrior, not as in like I'm terribly worried about this. I'm such a worrier.
No, you and I are the Ultimate Warriors,
Yeah.
and we'll be ultimately worrying about the Ultimate Warrior in our next episode. @HowToWarrior. Don't forget the hashtag. There will be a post, of course, on the Twitter @HowToWrestling. Make sure you give it a follow. And for all of your How To Wrestling needs, don't forget to check out the website, howtowrestling.com, where we have info and recommended bonus viewing, match listings, and info about all of our previous and upcoming episodes. Well, until next time, when we're most certainly going to be having our plates full with a controversial topic, it's a goodbye from me, Kevin.
And a goodbye from me, Jo.
And we'll see you next time on How To Wrestling.
See ya.